Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd just like to call the meeting to order, and I'll acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen peoples, known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt, or Kapsium nations, and that their historic connections to this land continues to this day. I will let you know that the mayor sends his regrets tonight. He had a long-standing engagement that he could not get out of, and so I will be chairing the meeting tonight. And I'll be looking for an approval of the agenda. Thank you, and seconded. Thank you. All in favor?
Point of clarification.
Yes.
Point of clarification. I just wanted to know tonight, because it's such an important meeting and we don't have one of our council members present, Mayor, I wanted to know if we have tie votes tonight. If in particular, as chair, do you have a particular strategy around letting this council know that those would come back and be revisited at a future meeting, knowing that this will frame a year's work, just so that we can have some comfort around the table of dealing with the agenda tonight without an invaluable member present? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Actually, I did speak to the mayor about this, and he assured me that he'd be watching the meeting afterwards, and if there was a topic that came up that he felt that should be coming back, that he would then bring that back. So you can rest assured that that will happen. Thank you. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Mayor's remarks. I'm going to just be very, very brief, and that I just wanted to thank the BIA for the beautiful holiday decorations. Many people think that it's the municipality that puts those decorations up. It isn't. I want to give full credit to the BIA. They do a wonderful, wonderful job, and we tend to get the credit. So I'd just like to extend that thanks to the BIA. And just a reminder that the Lighted Truck Parade is this Saturday. Bring your non-perishable items. And I think in the past, Oak Bay has been the community that has brought the most to the table as far as all the donations, whether food or monetary goes, and so I hope that we can continue that tradition this year. And with that, I will move on to item number 4.1, which is department service levels, and I have Ms. Bay and Ms. Morden here to talk about the strategic initiatives and this service level report. Thank you, Ms. Bay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening. Later on tonight's agenda, you'll be reviewing the council priority projects. But before we get to that, I just want to acknowledge that while council priority projects are part of what staff deliver, there's also a lot of work that happens at the operational level that aren't reflected in the council priority projects, but that still advance council's priorities, often indirectly. And really, until now, we haven't really daylighted what a lot of that work is. It's reported on through the annual report and things like the yearly accomplishments, the planned work for the following year, metrics, some of which are related to the operational work, some maybe a little bit more tangentially. So over the past years, we've had feedback from some of you, as well as some in the community and staff, that a better sense of what happens at a staff level as part of that operational work might be helpful to you at a governance level, as well as to us at a staff level in terms of knowing what it is that we're budgeting for and what we're managing staff towards. So with that in mind, we've gone ahead and had a look at really what we do at an organizational level. It's not something we've done yet. It's not something that typically has been done in municipalities. When we did a quick scan around comparing ourselves to other communities, we found indeed that this work is not typically done, at least not in a way that is daylighted, such as what we've done here. So we've been doing a fair bit of work on inventorying infrastructure service levels. That work's not been completed yet, but we'll be coming back to you at some point once that work is completed. But we thought that we may also find some benefit in looking in more detailed level at the operational service levels. So the work that's before you tonight is by no means I guess, envisioned as being the final product. We thought it would be worthwhile to touch base with you at this juncture to find out, is this something that you're even interested in advancing further? Is this in the right ballpark? regardless of where it goes next, I think there's value in this from a staff perspective and having this from an internally focused perspective. There may be value in expanding this or taking an approach that is maybe more connected to some externally focused objectives. We've kind of taken an internal look at this, and I know that there's some that think that maybe an external view or a view from externally looking in might also be helpful, and that can certainly also be accommodated. But regardless, this is a starting point that would be needed to take it to that next level. And so that's why we started here. It's also a potential starting point for connecting to a more rigorous system. Don't know whether council's interested in that. That's why we're here tonight. If council were interested in exploring that, we'd probably suggest directing us to come back with a project backgrounder so we could look at some of what that might involve in terms of budget, in terms of staff time, and giving you an opportunity to put it in context of your other council priority projects. So how service levels can be used, it's really, once they're identified, they can start to be used as a basis for examining whether changes might be needed in response to demographic changes, climate change impacts, budget constraints. All of those might cause you to go back and look at the service levels and say, what is it that needs to change to respond to some of those external constraints? They really give you a chance to balance the levers that are looked at from a governance perspective, which is your job of balancing cost, quality, risk. Those tend to play against each other. But without actually knowing what the current service levels are, it can be difficult to go through that balancing process. So it's before you tonight. I guess there's kind of two decision points before you tonight. One is, do you even want to advance service levels further? Do you see this as a worthwhile endeavor? If so, do you want to keep it at this level, or do you want to potentially take it further, as is reflected in, I think it's option number 6? Or do you want us just to advance what we have right now, either in its current shape or with some potential adjustments? So your options would be then to direct us to come back with further information. If you wanted adjustments to the service levels, this would also be an opportunity for you to do that. You could kind of identify the direction of change that you're looking for. Do you want the service level to go up or to go down? Then we'd come back with a project backgrounder, itemizing what the consequences of that might be from a budget perspective, what the service implications might be associated with that. And we could bring that back at a midpoint review or revisit of the council priorities and some of the work that you have us doing. Likely mid-year, we could come back with some of that information in the way of a project backgrounder, and at that same time, if it was of interest to you, we could also advance or give you some information on what an alternative or a next step approach might be to the service levels. Either way, if you're happy with the service levels and you want us to go ahead and move forward with that, that's also an option. In that case, we could report back on what our actual service levels are when we come forward with the annual report middle of the year. At that time, we'd likely be reporting on a goodly number of them, but not all, because we have not yet been tracking information on all of those service levels. So if you wanted us to collect that information, we'd start to put the systems in place for that starting in January, and then we'd track a full year of the data and report back to you on the actuals the following year, because the annual report's always kind of a half a year ahead of what the end of the year. So, Your Worship, that concludes my comments, or Chair, that concludes my comments, and the director team is here available to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks so much, Ms. Bay. So I think the process that we'll go through now is we'll come to this table for any questions that we might have of Ms. Bay or the team, and then we'll go to the public, and then we'll come back to this table for any comments or anything like that. So, Councillor Green, I have you first.
Thank you, Chair. And through you to Ms. Bay and Ms. Morden, thank you so much for such a detailed and comprehensive report. I have to admit I was a bit overwhelmed. And part of it is because I wasn't sure if these are benchmarks as well, and how they relate to governance. So I felt was a heavy operational side, and I've always been aware that we don't want to put our fingers in and our noses. Our noses are fine, but fingers in are not so fine on the operational side. Could you just clarify for me that the benchmarking that this may provide, and two, how this relates to our role as making decisions about governance? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Chair. It is the service levels that are in there right now are what we are currently delivering to. So it's what we are currently have budget for and currently have staff resources to deliver on. So it is a governance decision in the context of you make the decisions as to what the budget is and what the staffing levels are. So if you wish to change those service levels, that would typically have either a staff impact and or a budget impact. And so it's really just declaring what you get for the, declaring to the community what they get for the staff resources that we have available and the budget resources that we have available. And so changes have impacts on those, and that's why it's a governance level consideration.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is that everything, Councillor Green? Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff too for the report. I do agree that service levels assessment and reporting is of huge benefit, but it can take certainly a lot of work, and I think KPMG in Toronto has has done this widely throughout Eastern Canada, and so they've worked at it for a long time, and certainly really appropriate for large cities. And again, I agree that it is sometimes difficult to for the public, for residents especially, to understand the operational tasks that go into the framework of actually managing the district and building a good community for us. So it is really important, but I think for all of them, there's still performance metrics that are involved, and where I deviate a bit from this one is that generally from a governance standpoint, I look at programs and the operational tasks to support the programs as being the governance issue, because I am not sufficiently knowledgeable about the interworkings of each department to be able to accurately make a judgment call as to is that good enough or not. But I certainly appreciate the fact that Ms. Bay has said this will direct staff in some ways to guiding our budget document. But I guess in that regard, there is also, the next report has the survey results on it, and there were quite a few things on the survey that would indicate in a number of areas improvements were desirable to the people that completed the survey. At least, I'm not saying all residents, but to the people that completed the survey. And I'm wondering if staff could comment on how the results of the survey also fed into this.
Thank you. Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the survey results have been shared with Council and have been available to the community since September. On that website where we shared the survey results, we also included and distributed to Council a bit of a synopsis as to the changes that were being proposed at an operational level to respond to the feedback that we got from the community. And so there's a number of things there where we can make some changes within the context of existing budgets. And there are some changes that would require additional budget if we were to address them as the community shared that they would like. the decision as to whether to change those service levels would be a governance level decision. And really, for the first time now, we have a service level inventory that lists the services and the levels that we are providing them right now. So if council had a desire to adjust any of those service levels in response to the questionnaire, that's why we bring the questionnaire forward at this time as well, then council could direct staff to explore what it would take to adjust the service levels. I don't recall anybody asking for a downward adjustment to the service level, but there were a number of areas where there is a desire to see an increase in service levels, and staff could itemize that and bring it back for council's consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thanks. And a follow-up question. Thank you for that information. So for these service levels then, and I tend to think of them not as the operational, but the programs themselves, there are certainly, particularly as we start developing some of the bigger projects we're working on, the work that will be required to perhaps produce a satisfaction level that is what the community is seeking will be handled by multiple departments, not by a departmental task. And so, and this is so operational and departmental, I'm wondering how we will judge the performance of some larger projects where it will really require input and actual hands-on by multiple departments.
Thank you. Ms. Bay?
Your Worship, I'm not sure I entirely understand the question in that context, but I can say that from the service levels perspective, we largely focused on the services that were delivered, like what services are being delivered. We didn't focus so much on the customer satisfaction with those levels of service because we've been measuring that through the annual questionnaire. I recognize that in some respects it's difficult to tease out the difference between the quality of the service and the quantity of the service. In many cases, there's a tight interweaving of the two. I also say that in some cases it's difficult to, in advance, say that we will deliver service within X number of days, for example, as just to grab something out of thin air, because our ability to be responsive has a lot to do with the volume of requests that we get. So for example, let's grab one like graffiti. If we have 1,000 tags, which I certainly hope we never get that volume of tags, but and we have one person assigned to going and cleaning up that graffiti, it'll obviously take a lot longer to remove that graffiti than if we have 5 incidents of graffiti that is being tackled by that one person. And so it's difficult to in advance set out what the service level will be in terms of a responsiveness window. But certainly one of the themes that we heard through the annual questionnaire was comments around customer satisfaction and different levels of service. And so that's something that administration has taken away and is mindful of, that there's a desire there to see some improvements in that regard. And we do have some things underway that we're trying to do to tackle that at a departmental operational level. And there might be a need, and if there is a need, after we have some more discussions at an operational level, I can conceive of a scenario where we might bring that back to council and say, in order to further advance some of this, we may need to do some work that requires some additional budget focus, or we might need to change some systems to support those customer service improvements. So that's something that we're very alive to at an operational level and would bring back.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, I have Councillor Watson, Councillor Smart, and Councillor Appleton.
Okay, thank you very much, Acting Mayor. I'll make a couple comments, and then I do actually have some specific questions. I would kind of agree at looking at this. It's a really great inventory to give a sense of actually what's going on in the organization. But my concern with it would be, like, it's focused operationally. It's in and of itself, it wouldn't be a good reporting tool to the council or or the public, because there are too many items for anybody to really understand what the performance level of the organization is. So I just wanted, when we come back later for discussion, I really would like to talk about a more limited number of performance indicators that we could have for governance purposes. Yes, I'm concerned also that even, like, it's a great inventory and it could get bigger as activities change. And I think that even if it were just used internally for staff to manage what's going on, that possibly in every case of every indicator, there will be variance from what the base level service delivery is, which then leads to a need to explain the variance, which for this many items would be a lot of internal work. So I'm not sure it's quite the right direction to go, but I do have a couple questions about the practicality of it. So for example, one of the indicators is about the number of vehicles that get in the fleet that get serviced. So right now it says 100, but if we acquired 2 more vehicles, would that be a service level jump? Maybe or maybe not. It really depends how many staff we have allocated to it and what things are coming up with the vehicles. So I just think I guess I'll ask that a question. If it went from 100 to 102, would that be a service level jump? Or how would you know if you did more in that year that in fact that you were in effect providing a higher level of service?
Thank you. Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it would be a service level jump. Whether it would be consequential or not would obviously depend on the amount of the increase and the impact. So in some cases, a minor change like that might not have an impact. In other cases, certainly if it happened year after year after year, there could be, if not a staff impact, a budget impact, as each of those vehicles would need servicing and maintenance and so forth. And there would be eventually a need to recognize that incremental increase.
Thank you. And Councillor Watson?
And I have a sort of a related question. What if external factors change what's required or expected in a given year? So, for example, that might be on the communications front, some big issue blows, and all of a sudden we get way more requirement to respond to the public about issues. What would that... How would I would say that probably naturally in the organization you redistribute resources, certainly within your department, to the extent you can. So it may affect, you may divert and manage one thing to a much higher level than you expected, and something else gives. Is that really an overall reduction in service? What if you could just comment on that?
Thank you. Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when there's a requirement to absolutely do a service and it's not discretionary, and I would suggest that the item that you just brought up would fall into that category of it's something that we would respond to, even if it was over and above the level that we had anticipated, then what that starts to do is as identified, impact potentially on other service levels or alternatively on the council priority projects. And so the council priority projects are really what we would do when with the time that we have available after we've satisfied all the operational requirements. So this is the tie-in to the council priority projects that are later on the agenda. And so how that might play out is if there's a significant squeeze on the staff that are involved in that are also delivering on a council priority projects, it might delay that council priority projects. We'd of course still prioritize it to the extent that we can, but the urgent sometimes has to take precedent over the important in situations like this. And so it just allows us a little bit more to share that story with council and the community to explain maybe why there might have been some pressures on the timelines associated with council priority projects, because this would daylight that in a way that we haven't been able to date.
Councillor Watson, you have more?
Thank you. Yes, just one more question at the moment. As you said yourself, Ms. Bay, this kind of data collection at the service level, with the service level values that or data points that are on this chart, really only speak to quantity and not quality. And I was looking for any kind of quality reference. So even if you collected this at the staff level, just at the quantities, and did that data capture for maybe it looks like it's up to about 250 line items at the moment, possibly more. How would managers in the organization be able to calculate the quality of that service? So, for example, like street poles being maintained, or maintaining street lights. So there was that they're all working, or 95% operational on average, or I was thinking about other indicators like responding to incoming correspondence within 5 work days 90% of the time. That would speak to quality. And I just wondered if there's any way to, I'm not suggesting that it should happen because we're going to be discussing about that, but to actually take what's here and turn it into a more qualitative index for the activities that are listed.
Thank you, Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. It could be done in many cases. I think it's a matter of time and the systems. I think the question then would be, is it a service level or a service quality? Then it might be something slightly different than what we have prepared here. Having said that, our objective as always is to ensure that council gets what council finds valuable in terms of decision making. So that's why we're bringing this forward to council at this point, is to get direction on what would be helpful to council. If this is seen as mostly as an operational tool, then we can certainly use it as an operational tool internally. It would probably look slightly different. We might tweak it in other ways to make it work for us internally. But what we're here today is to try and get a sense of what would be helpful to council. As has been noted, it is a fair bit of work to maintain and report on. So if it's not adding the amount of value that council wants from that amount of work, then that's worth considering. I think it's just really, we brought this forward because we've heard some discussions about service levels at the council table, and we were doing this from an operational perspective, and we thought, okay, let's see what council thinks. If this works for council, great. If not, great. We'll find out what does work for council.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor de Miss Bay, very appreciative of the report. I feel like I learned so much looking through this. I'll hold my general comments to later, and I just have a few questions. My first one was just with regards to I-1 and the emergency management, and I just wanted to know, is it at all an existing service level to have community education and engagement for emergency planning, or is that outside of operational activities?
Ms. Bay.
Your Worship,
may
if I
call
might
on the
defer
fire
to
chief.
the
Yes.
fire chief for that one.
Welcome, Chief.
Through your worship, sorry, that was I-1 you said?
Yes, correct. And I understand that it doesn't say that there is any community engagement, and so hence my question of just wondering if that is an existing service.
This is strictly for our municipal staff as well as volunteer programs. But as far as service level, there is a requirement that we have training for our staff. But as far as a standard, there's no standard.
Thank you. And further question, Councillor Smart?
Yes, thank you. No, I appreciate understanding that. My next question through you, Acting Mayor, was just with regards to H2 and the HR surveys. And I just wanted to know, I gather it says 3, but I'm gathering that means every 3 years that they might be done. And I'm wondering, is that something that comes to council in any sort of aggregate way as far as staff retention information, and something that may involve council at some point, or is that all strictly operational and internal?
Thank you. And we'll have our Director of HR come forward, I think, for that. Welcome.
Thank you, and through the chair. We have had the employee survey in our HR plan for the last 4 years, and so we are scheduled to do a survey in 2025. And so what we're proposing is that best practice is typically doing a survey every 2 to 3 years. And so this would be the first ever District of Oak Bay employee survey that's been conducted. We have conducted different types of surveys with employees, but to actually do an employee engagement survey would be the first ever that we've done. And so we're planning on doing that in 2025.
Thanks, Ms. Donnelly. Anything further, Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, to Ms. Donnelly, I guess my question would be, being that this is new, there may not be an answer yet, but I guess if there's any sort of red flag issues that might involve future council priorities that might improve the environment for employees, would staff potentially bring us that type of information?
Ms. Donnelly.
I would think that that would be something that staff would be wanting to bring forward to council for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Yes, through Acting Mayor, and this is not a question related to HR.
Okay.
I just wanted to understand, so it was P31 with irrigating beach access points. I just wondered if that was a fire prevention measure, or is that why do we irrigate beach access points? Thank you.
I think I'm going to go to Chief McDonald, or am I going to Mr. Meikle? Mr. Meikle. Mr. Meikle, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair. So I think it's from our case, it's a couple of reasons. Would be one is obviously watering the any plants, trees we've planted in that area. I think it's more referring to the pathways down to the beachfront. But certainly in hot weather, we have been known to also, I guess it all leads back to feeding and taking care of the plants and trees, really. But there's fire prevention involved in that, and it's part of why we keep the trees healthy.
Thanks, Mr. Meikle. Anything to add, Chief McDonald? No, thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, to staff. My next question was just with regards to the public queries for engineering and public works. I get so many questions from the public around where to go to ask questions in person, and I wondered, like, since COVID, with public works being a little bit less accessible, does the general public come to the planning and engineering counter to ask questions of both engineering and public works? Could it be clarified what the sort of public access points are for resident questions for engineering and public works? Thank you.
Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome for the very first time Director Rennick.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, Chair. The engineering department maintains counter service for 17 and a half hours per week at Municipal Hall. So that's the morning, every Monday to Friday. That does primarily deal with engineering queries. However, we can also take public works related queries during that time. Members of the public can also phone Public Works. There is a phone number, and for all opening hours, there is someone there taking calls. So either in person at counter hours in the morning or phone Public Works. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Smart?
That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll go to Councillor Appleton now, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. And through you two, I'm going to sort of ask a series of pedantic questions, and I apologize for that. So I'm just confirming that based on sort of the notation that's made on the overall table, and I guess I should start by saying I'm a significant supporter of levels of service review, having this information assembled and starting this process. I'm a big proponent of it. So not necessarily jumping ahead to resolutions here, but I'm definitely supportive of those, of taking a course that allows us to keep revisiting this and probably narrowing it down such that it's a useful tool, or a more confined tool. I was very struck by the notation in the staff report that talked about service level coming from myriad sources, many historical with no known written or governance source, which is interesting. So I think that there's a lot of validity and a lot of value even in just getting to this point. So I appreciate the information that's in front of us. Essentially, I'm looking to confirm this essentially represents status quo baseline state. This is what is currently budgeted for, and this is currently what we're experiencing. Is that correct?
Ms. Bay.
That's correct.
Councillor Appleton.
So thank you, Chair, and thank you for that. So, and then I'm also correct in assessing that a good number of these we are tracking a metric with respect to some of these levels of service, but some of them are mandatory and some of them are not. Some of them, well, not mandatory, but some of them have flexibility to them, whereas some of them do not. You know, I'm seeing items on here for, you know, emergency communications and water maintenance and insurance and these types of things, which are a metric, but clearly not really flexible.
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the service levels indicated here have a range of them. Some of them have their source in legislative requirements, some in health and safety requirements, and some in past council directions on just general service levels that might not be related to either of those.
Councillor Appleton.
Right, so thank you, Chair, and thank you through you to staff. So there's certainly items on this list that would be inadvisable or impossible to adjust the service level. Essentially, is what we're saying.
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's some that have a lot less discretion to them than the others. Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
thank
you,
you, Chair,
Councillor
and thank you, and through staff. And I just wanted to confirm something that I thought I heard Ms. Bay say off the top, and I was going to ask this question, was that I guess despite how lengthy and comprehensive this is, there's still items that are not necessarily captured at this stage of the game. And do we have a sense of particular categories of metrics that are not yet captured because the information is not yet available?
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As noted, we haven't obviously captured infrastructure service levels because that's part of a separate initiative. We have done our best to capture the breadth of services, but just given the nature of this type of assignment, we fully expect that there will be some that we have missed. Just that's the nature of the game when you take a first pass of this. So I don't think any of us are prepared to say that it captures 100% of the services that are undertaken in our organization. There are some more minor ones that probably didn't quite make the cut. I'm hearing that there's a sense already that this is maybe a bit much, and we did filter out some of those more minor ones even before including it here. But even of the more major ones, there may be some that we've missed.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. And just to sum up, then I sort of have a question in summation and building on what Ms. Bay has said and through you. With respect to an interpretation of the option presented in the staff report as option 6, a comprehensive approach to operational service levels. So are we then contemplating something that if we talk about I've just detailed my understanding of a comprehensive approach may be different than what staff originally intended. So are we considering something that would allow us to, I would take that as being something that would be a potentially positive step of taking the existing larger list of things that are presented here, including some things which are essentially not discretionary and not at liberty to be adjusted, to potentially develop a more refined list, a more compact list with some more defined metrics, or some more just basically some expanded metrics on those, but less overall content that council could cast its mind towards. Is that what I'm interpreting by sort of a comprehensive approach as outlined in 6?
Thank you. Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can certainly appreciate the head scratching around that word, because it can be interpreted in a number of different ways. For clarity, I think what I meant by that was that anything probably more or different than what we've presented here, any of the thoughts that have been put forward in terms of aligning this maybe with other models, taking more of a focus on governance, taking a more outside-in type of perspective, looking at it from the perspective of customer service. Any of those elements, I think I would categorize as more comprehensive. It would take any of those would still have required this as the foundational piece. So this is not a wasted effort. We would have needed to do this from an operational perspective anyhow. But anything further than this would likely require additional resources, anything further or different. And so if council were to provide direction on where it is that you want us to go, then we could bring back some cost estimates and some timeline estimates and staffing estimates as what would be required to advance that further work.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton. Is that it? Okay, thank you. Councillor Green, you had another question and follow-up?
Yes, just briefly, and through you, thank you very much. Just two questions because you've highlighted them, I think on page, oh, sorry, my glasses. Page 5 of the report under financial impact and staffing impact. And those are questions that I had in terms of what something costs and the impact on capacity. We talk a lot about staff capacity. My only worry about, really, this is an evolving organic document in some ways. So my question is, would it be possible to reflect somewhere what the financial and staffing capacity impacts are where service levels are requested to be raised or increased? Would that be an area that would be helpful, I think, for governance at some point? But I'm just asking the question. I don't want to make it more complicated than it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if council sees anything on the list where that prompts a desire to either increase or decrease the service level, staff's recommendation is that council request a project backgrounder for that service level, and we would come back identifying the staffing and financial implications associated with the change.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Watson.
Councillor Goulet. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Just a question I wanted to follow up on Councillor Appleton's confirmation that these were basically status quo levels, that the numeric that appears in the to tell us what X is. And I just had a question about setting, like arriving at that number. And as an example, I was looking at F43. You don't have to go look at it. It's risk management, claims management. And so the baseline is given as receive, report, and monitor 30 claims annually. And I just wondered, that may have been the service level in a year, but I would imagine there's some fluctuation because you can't really predict what claims will be. If you were even going to use these operationally, would you want to refine them so that that number was based on some kind of year's average based on a set budget? Because I can imagine you might get a really horrific claim one year that took up a lot of time and then you could manage 16 others, or some years there were just less claims just because of the normal distribution that you get, that things are not exactly the same every year. So if you could just comment on the actual setting of that baseline number and how it might be refined if we were going to use this.
Thank you, Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll take that as an example, and I'll respond in kind of in a general sense. In most cases, we did look at where we had the data available for a period of time. We would typically look at the average level and put in for that. In a few cases where it seemed appropriate, we used the highest number that we had encountered in recent years, and we used language like up to, because we had obviously been able to deal with that volume with existing budget and existing resources, so we thought it would be appropriate to capture that as the maximum that we've been able to deal with. So that was the general approach that we took.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll go to the public now. I don't see anyone from the public in the chambers, but anybody online who'd like to speak to this item, you can raise your hand. I don't think that's a hand. I think that's a... is that a hand or is that a, oh, it's a mouse. Yeah, okay, thank you. I thought it was a mouse, yes. Okay, so seeing no one who would like to make any comments, then I will come back to this table. So I think that really what we want to look at here is either we accept the reports, this as it is, and reports out annually. Do we want more details? Do we want to make any changes to the service levels? Or do we want to staff to follow up on any of those identified as benefiting from additional information? Or do we want to just, as I said, report back through the annual report? So I'll bring it back to this table to have that discussion. And if anyone would like to start, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And once again, yes, I do appreciate all of the work that has gone into this, but I also understand that we're in the midst of doing so many things with refining asset management and capital projects and this, and I certainly, perhaps because of my background, tend to think of surface levels being an important way to explain, to make the connection between what operations do and service delivery to residents, because I do think we struggle with that. But I do realize that it's a very involved process, and to do a more comprehensive approach would take more staff resources to compile all of that. And I guess if I think of the City of Vancouver, I think they have about, for their operational ones, have about six categories with 70 indicators. I certainly, for a small community, would limit my expectations to what is more reasonable for staff. So I think that while I'm interested in it, we continuously hear about capacity. And so, I listen to others talk about number 6, but even requesting a background or on a more comprehensive approach, well, that might give us a better indication of what we could do. If it was more fulsome, I would still like to see it focused on programs, from a governance standpoint, the programs and the operational tasks to support the programs. So getting it into major categories. And so that's what I would like to see happen. And number 6 here has a more comprehensive approach to operational service levels. Well, I appreciate that these are really of value to staff, and I know we're developing preventative maintenance programs, and a lot of these tasks are going to grow in number and information that will be gathered, but it's really how restricted can we get it? How compact can we get it so that it still stays meaningful, I think, to the community and to council to make decisions on. So that's what I would be looking for if we send it back for a more comprehensive approach.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Watson.
Thank you. My feelings mirrors a little bit of what Councillor Patterson is saying. I think that to launch a process like this and then continue doing it takes a lot of time, not just for the compiler, but also for the individual department staff that are going to be providing that information. And while it might help to inform operations, I don't think it's the right tool for informing governance decisions. And when I was, and I've been thinking about what is useful for the public and for maybe council, is more like a much smaller number of benchmarks that are based on our performance relative to municipalities of our size and complexity. So that I can say, well, in Oak Bay, Kamloops isn't a good example because it's too big, but I don't know, help me, pick maybe a Esquimalt that which probably has not necessarily an entirely duplicative set of programs, but a lot of them will be, so that we can compare our performance sort of head-to-head, apples to apples, or closely apples to apples with another municipality, and that becomes a much easier way to report out to the public about how we're doing, and then as they see for themselves the value they're getting for their tax dollars, which is often a performance metric in their own minds. So if this exercise were to morph in some way, I would prefer to see that the energy was put into developing a set of benchmarks. Generally, they are around programs, and that would be. And again, sometimes they're presented on dashboards, and you can see how you're scoring. That is also quite a bit of work, but once it's established, it's easier to manage because it's much smaller in scale in terms of kind of what's being evaluated. But in those benchmarks, there's a combination of quality and quantity that's kind of condensed within whatever that measure is. So that's my feeling about this. I wouldn't want to support any of the recommendations that are in the staff report right now because I think it would be taking us in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. I have Councillor Smart, Appleton, then Green.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the comments around the table. It's so great to hear others' perspectives. I'm really drawn to the idea of not losing this great work that has been done, but refining it to the usefulness and the perspective of the governance. And so how I could imagine going forward is really a list of 10 to 20 things that are very much from the perspective of residents. So I'm thinking things like how much graffiti are we cleaning up? How much lawn mowing are we doing? How much percentage of vacancy is there, or wait lists, particularly for swim classes and childcare? Like, what are those sort of key, 20 metrics of service that we hear about a lot that are controllable? If we can't actually have an impact of increasing or lessening the service, then it's not really relevant or worth wasting staff's time. Having said that, I was obviously prepared to support option 1, which is just accepting the service levels with no changes. And then based on the previous discussion, I was thinking of potentially going ahead with 4, 5, and 6, based on the concept that 6 would be that condensing of things, and that 4 would really pick up all those items that were flagged in this report that I sense that staff might have some important information to bring back on those flagged items. So I'll leave it to other people to comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smart. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Okay, one of the questions that I had that I don't think that we necessarily that we dealt with explicitly here was that one of the components of the staff recommendation is referencing specifically those items in the table which already have a follow-up recommendation on them that are flagged for follow-up in the report. And so I just want to confirm with staff, it is staff's recommendation, because obviously it wouldn't be in the report if it wasn't written that way, that there would be sort of specific documentation prepared for follow-up for each one of those metrics, which is flagged in the report in attachment 1. Is that correct?
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton.
So these are, thank you, and through you, Chair. So they're considered to be something that is in need of, I guess, fairly immediate or essentially in need of confirmation of a service level for each one of those individual components. I get that.
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Or if there are related matters that staff would be seeking council direction on in terms of budget implications related to those particular initiatives.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So is there a, are we talking, is there a significant, like, there's a fair number in here, so I'm just thinking about what are the staffing and resourcing implications of preparing the material that would be required to support the follow-up flags?
Thank you. Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some of them would probably require reports coming back to council. Some of them might be dealt with through budget, through the budget process. So they're not quite apples and apples through the report. They kind of fall into different categories. There would be work associated with it. If council were so inclined, it might be helpful if there's a little bit of open-endedness in terms of how quickly staff report back on them, because some of them might be coming back in association with related work that might be coming some months or even years down the road. So that might be how some of those can be most efficiently dealt with in terms of bringing them back.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton.
Well, thank you, Chair. Okay, so I think I'm sort of very much in alignment with sort of the general conversation around the table here about sort of the concept of narrowing down. I did appreciate Ms. Bay's comments about outward in-facing, customer service-facing, and metrics that are tactile to the public, essentially, and also the fact that the confirmation that there are a number of metrics in here that there is no service level adjustment to contemplate. You need to codify it and you need to have it in a document, but there's not really a lever to pull on that. So I guess what I am thinking, just picking up on what some of my colleagues have said here, is I see item 1, as it were, option 1, basically accepting the service levels. I see that as sort of essentially looking and approving, codifying what, as described in the report, is something that has really not, a lot of times, not been captured on paper someplace. So I think it's important to look at option one, even if things change in the future, because it allows us to, I guess, as a council, and effectively endorse or take ownership of the existing status quo. I guess what I'm thinking about is if we're looking at 4, 5, and 6. So one is the follow-up, and I think we've talked about that a little bit. We've got 5, which is directing ongoing reporting and annual opportunities for council adjustments. 6 being the comprehensive approach, possibly representing a tightening or a narrowing of the scope along the lines of what's being discussed. Essentially, I guess I'm asking, I guess all things are technically possible, but would you do 6 before you do 5, essentially? So can you narrow the scope as laid out in option 6, and then report back on a narrowed or more confined scope series of metrics? Is that possible?
Thank you. Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think my recommendation would be if council is inclined to go with option 6, to wait to consider option 5 until such time as option 6 had come back and been completed, because option 6 is essentially us coming back with an estimate of what the costs would be. Council may or may not choose to pursue that project after receiving that information, and in the absence of knowing what it is that you're wanting us to report back on, it would be difficult for us to bring back something consistent with your wishes.
Thank you, Ms. Bay. Councillor Appleton, you're good. Councillor Green, and then I'll go to Councillor Patterson again.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, thank you very much again for this report. What this does for me is, I mean, it is the first time we've had an inventory, so it provides a context for all of our programs and services, which we have not seen before, which I think is tremendous, and I think that's the important part of this work. It's often hard to understand the individual elements of program delivery and service delivery. So this has been incredibly helpful. I think I'm, again, as others have said, I think I'm more inclined to not drive you in another direction and get even more granular. I think we have the context for the programs and services. I think what our public probably wants to know is which programs are being delivered, when, how, what is the cost, what are the implications, whether or not they're successful, and so on. That's the kind of information I think the public wants to know, and they want to know what services we're doing well and what services we may not be doing so well. And that survey, I think the survey information also helped to inform us a bit on that. But I would support certainly receiving the report. And then I think we're hesitant to move forward in this direction, and I understand the hesitation. So receiving the report, but using this as a baseline, as an inventory that for the first time has been done in Oak Bay, I think that's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I just would like to clarify with staff, the report as it's presented, is this preparatory to the budget process? And by that I mean, certainly receiving the report, I value all of the work that has gone into this and the information that it gives to council and to the community. But is it necessary that council affirm what is before us to feed into the budgets? Is that the purpose of any of this, or is it totally independent?
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've gone this far without having service levels, and we've had budgets, so it would be difficult to argue that this is essential to the budgeting process. It's more a matter of highlighting for council and for the community what those base assumptions are going into the budget, so that if you wanted to make adjustments that had budget implications, you'd be aware of that. Is it critical? No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. A follow-up question based on Councillor Appleton's. It sounds like he's got a bit of an appetite maybe for recommendation 1, just to kind of recognize or affirm that this is what we do. And just from my perspective, just affirming that, I'd be comfortable with that, just kind of to make it sort of public and on the record to recognize this. But in order to do so, I would need some assurance of the quality and accuracy of the numbers themselves, which given it was a huge amount of work and you've pulled it from all over the place, it's not to say that I don't think you're doing good work. I just think that it's so many metrics that I would want some kind of quality assurance on the numbers before I would be prepared to affirm these service levels. If you could just comment on how you might do that, or what you can say about the sort of accuracy or the quality of the data at the moment.
Thank you, Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Strategic Initiatives worked with each of the directors closely, multiple back and forths and checks on the data in terms of what's in there. It's to the best of the knowledge of each of the directors who supplied the information.
Thank you. And then my next question isn't really for staff, it's for council. In recommendation 5, which we've talked about, there's a sub-recommendation about reducing the number of questionnaires that go out annually. And I wondered, the suggestion from staff, at least in the recommendation, is to go from 3 to 1. And I wondered, I certainly wouldn't mind discussing reducing that, the frequency with which we do that, because it is a big exercise, and it may not be meaningful to ask every year, because the changes can be so fine-grained or whatever from year to year that the citizens may not engage, or there may not be enough to sort of twig their interest in doing it. But I wondered about looking at that as a sort of separate recommendation to reduce that from 3 to 2. Whether or not anything else in this report goes forward, because I think that was an kind of an interesting observation by staff, that we've learned about the amount of effort it takes to do that. So it's kind of I'm kind of putting a question towards the governing body here for some thought. I'm not ready to make a recommendation yet. I won't do so if there's no appetite.
I think also Ms. Bay mentioned that if we went with option 6, then she would rather we wait for option 5 to come before we made a decision on option 5. I think that's what I heard you say. Is that correct, Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, if Council wished to adjust the service level on the annual questionnaire, that could be considered as a separate motion at this time. It would free up capacity to do other things. It is one of those initiatives that does touch on quite a few departments, so it is quite time-consuming. With respect to my comment about option 5 coming back after option 6, it was really with respect to the piece about reporting annually, and it was tied to the community questionnaire just in terms of freeing up capacity to do that annual reporting. That's why it was connected.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I think that, for me, I trust that staff leadership will choose to track those items on this list, just like you've said, and that provide value for managing operational needs. And there's a lot of things on there that can help ensure that they have a good sense of the staff workload, scheduling meeting or legislative responsibilities, meeting of timelines, etc. But there aren't, to me also, there aren't really in the realm of governance. So. But this report is also really good in flagging areas of where we need to have a different level of maintenance or things like that throughout the report. So it's going to be, I guess I'll look to this table now to see what options people would like to float and see how they go. Okay, I have I'll go with Councillor Appleton first, and then I'll go to Green. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just procedurally, I just note that as it's laid out here, there's a number of different options, and as staff have described in the report, they can be accepted separately, in combination, etc. So, if it's acceptable to the chair, if we bring forward motions, I'm assuming that it's going to be acceptable to bring forward motions for each individual component and essentially sever them. They're presented sort of separately, but they're not in exclusion of each other.
So you're saying, like, if you want option 1, and then we'll do option 1, then option 2, option 3, yes, we will.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity for council, because we can combine components of these. So first of all, Chair, I will just move that the staff report be received.
Seconded. No discussion on receiving, so all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Thank you.
And so, Chair, I would move that that option 1, that the service levels referenced in the December 2nd, 2024 report from the Director of Strategic Initiatives be affirmed.
Seconded. And any discussion?
If I can just motivate.
Yep,
briefly,
you can
Chair.
motivate for sure.
Very briefly, Chair, it just, I don't see this as in an exclusion of modifying them in the future. I see this as essentially a direct response to the commentary in the staff report that identifies that this information has been compiled from a bunch of different sources that may or may not actually have been codified anywhere. So I don't see this necessarily as etching everything in stone, but rather calling these things into a formalized sense so that we can review, adjust, and otherwise discuss them in the future. So that's my motivation for this component.
Okay, anyone else? No. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair. So I would also like to move option 4, which is staff being directed to follow up as noted in attachment 1 of the December 2nd report to consider future service level confirmation or adjustment. So specifically with respect to those items flagged as follow up in attachment 1.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Smart. Would you like to motivate, Councillor
Just
Appleton?
very briefly, Chair, I just note that, I think that all of the components that are flagged for follow-up in the report are of significance. I will just note as well that there's a number of items in here, because there's just a great volume of them, but I will just note that there's a number of items that we have talked specifically around the council table about talking about service levels and how we might evaluate those. I note that application reviews, development-related applications to council and board of variance per year, I think relates directly to council discussions about how that might be streamlined. I see inspecting, flushing and cutting, sort of inspection and maintenance of sanitary and other mains as well, which has been discussed around the council table of late. Water meter reading is on here as well. We just talked about that not that long ago. So I think that these components are significant to review. So thank you, Chair.
Anyone else? No? Okay, so then I'll call the question. Sorry, Councillor Watson.
Yes, a comment on that. I don't think I would support the motion. I'm concerned that by doing that, we're suggesting that this inventory of 225 or 300 items suddenly becomes something that staff do need to keep track of. And that's a big operational request, which requires resources. And I'm not sure, based on the kind of discussion we've had and the questions we've asked, that's really where we want staff to be spending their time. I think recognizing the baseline is important, but doing further work on it, if it's not going to be even an internal reporting tool, which I wouldn't have, it's a lot of data. It's a big operational ask. And I'm not sure that I'm there. I'm not sure that I want to further this particular exercise. I think there might be a better one that I would ask staff to spend time on.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, I just wanted to comment in my support of option 4, and it was just with regards to the fact that all of this great work has been done, and I see this as a one-time follow-up to this particular list where a lot of items have been flagged that I see as getting ahead of potential problems early. When I look at them, I immediately do want to know a little bit more information and expect that it may take some time for staff to, come back with why they were flagged and what the implications of them are. But I see this as basically just another follow-up of option 1 that is sort of acknowledging the validity of where we're at and not losing track of the good work that has been done in this report.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Green and then Patterson and then to second-time speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I just have a follow-up question to Councillor Watson's comments also, which I appreciated. Through you, Chair, what are the staff capacity issues of option 4? Is there something there that we should be aware of if we proceed with option 4? Thank you.
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. A number of the initiatives would be brought back through work that council has already directed, but there are some newly raised issues that would require staff to come back. Sorry, I don't have an exact hourly estimate for you associated with that one, but obviously every time staff bring forward a report, it does take some effort. Those were deemed by staff to be of consequence in terms of from a risk management perspective or a capacity perspective itself. So these were areas where staff felt strongly that there was a need to have a discussion with council as to how to address the issues that were addressed in there.
Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, Ms. Bay, you said that there's some that we had already asked for reporting back on. So would those then still come back as reports if this option failed?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. And Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Appleton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I will not support this as it is put forward. My understanding is, of course, that this is not being used to, in fact, as a framework for our budgeting process that will be coming up. If there are matters that are of a more urgent nature and not discretionary, I would expect that those items will be brought to council during the budget, the financial considerations by the relevant department staff to flag them as issues that require immediate consideration by council. And I like Councillor Watson, this is a lot of work, and I don't think it will be lost because this is an operational document, so it's of greatest value to staff. But I won't support the motion for as it's put forward.
Thank you. And I have Green, then Appleton.
Thank you. I also will not be supporting the motion for the reasons stated by all three of us, I think, and the concerns raised about my concern about staff capacity, my concern about other projects being sidelined potentially, and I think it's important that we not pull staff in so many different directions. And I agree, this is an internal operational document that will be very useful for staff and certainly useful for us down the road, but not as a critical piece of governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just, I'm specifically putting forward this motion and as recommended by staff in the report to, like I say, respond to specific items that staff have put forward. As we could technically be selecting any number of different things off of this long list for adjustments. These are the ones that staff have put forward saying this is something that is of important for follow-up at this time. So I'm just following along from that. And I agree that most of the items that I see on this list are things that council has recently discussed or items where, we have come to this point in the past. Capacity is a real issue for sure. But what I've heard from staff is that this isn't necessarily something that arrives all at once or in one large package, but as part of ongoing updates on certain project-related matters. So I understand the concern about capacity. I think staff have put these forward as recommendations, as recommendations for follow-up for a reason. So I'm just going with that.
Thank you. I guess I'll weigh in. I think that for me, knowing that we will be following up on the, anyhow on the things that council had requested before, that I would have to be in agreement with councillors Green, Watson, and Patterson in that I don't want to take away from staff capacity for reporting back on these. And I think that Councillor Patterson made a good point that if there was something that did need to come forward, it would come forward. So I will be voting against the motion. Okay, on that, I will call the question. All in favor? Councillor Smart and Appleton in favor, and opposed? Councillor Patterson, Green, Watson, and Braithwaite opposed. Do we have any other motions? Councillor Watson.
Yes, I would like to move the following motion. That staff develop a preliminary set of performance benchmarks that would permit comparison of Oak Bay service delivery to municipalities of similar size, range of programs, and complexity.
Okay, you may have to say that one again for people.
I will go I'll just go really slowly. that staff develop a preliminary set of performance benchmarks that would permit comparison of Oak Bay's service delivery to municipalities of similar size, range of programs, and complexity.
Okay, do I have a second for that? Second for discussion? Okay, would you like to motivate Councillor Watson?
I think, as I have already expressed, that we need a smaller set and more focused set of measures to inform the public and ourselves as council of really how well we're doing. And benchmarking is used quite widely to do this. So I can't even begin to suggest what those might be, but there is, I am sure, enough information out there to develop at least, when I say preliminary set, that might be 10 or 12 items in total that actually allow us to report out in a more simplified, but in a way kind of distilled fashion to the community, and to know ourselves about really how we measure up. So that's where I think we should change direction away from many, many items to something that allows us, when we are walking around the community, to sort of point to that more limited set of things about how we're doing. And it allows us to engage with the public with some depth, but greater simplicity, I would say. So that's why I'm moving this forward. But I'm happy to hear suggestions about amending that if it doesn't quite sound right. So, but that was my first stab at it.
Councillor Patterson, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I certainly appreciate the intent of this, and eventually I would really like to get to benchmarking performance. But I come back to the capacity we have, and this would be putting yet another task that is very dissimilar from what is presented before us tonight, and taking it in a totally different direction. So it would be basically initiating a new task for the staff, and keeping in mind our capacity. I'm hesitant to support this at this time.
Perhaps I can make a suggestion. Maybe what we need to do is maybe get a project backgrounder on this. Maybe we may need to amend that motion to get a project backgrounder on this, and that might make people feel a little bit more comfortable. If that's something someone would like to do. Green.
Yeah, one of the things that I think this is an interesting suggestion, and I agree that there are concerns. I agree with Councillor Patterson. It's another direction entirely. But one of the things that we have never done is a performance review of our council and how we're performing, and this information goes rather hand in hand. And I'm not sure which comes first, the cart or the horse on this one, but I would think that those would be complementary sets of information that I certainly would appreciate, not only as a council member, but as a resident. So that isn't helping us with this motion at the moment, but that's a whole other part of this, but I think they're connected.
Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I'm still weighing whether I'm going to support the motion. I am rather interested in it. I wasn't necessarily feeling like I needed to know how we compared to other municipalities. That I can understand that aspect to it, but I guess where I was headed with this simplified list was actually more quality of life. So for instance, if we were to talk about availability of swim classes, or the amount of time in which all graffiti was removed from anywhere in the village, that some of those things that we could actually control would have more of a qualitative goal associated with them. And again, I like the idea of only having 10, 12, or 20 of these things, but things that are those things that we can control and say, actually, we think it's very important to have 100% of all graffiti removed within 48 hours. And that's 100% of the service level versus a 50% of that service level might be graffiti removed within 2 weeks. That kind of qualitative thing is a little bit more appealing than whether or not Saanich is doing as good a job at removing graffiti as us, because I think it's more about the end result of quality of life of those items. So I'm not in support of the motion. It's just a little different than where I was sitting.
Thank you. I have Councillor Appleton, Green, and then Watson.
Thank you, Chair, and I think I'm going in a similar direction to some of my colleagues here, and not in support of the motion on the floor, not because I don't think that's useful information, because I think it is very useful information. I think that type of information would be very informative and would actually give us something interesting to go on. I guess, but I do see it as different from what we're actually discussing tonight, because in fact what we're just discussing on this item is departmental service levels and service level evaluation. And I think that there is a difference between performance metrics and levels of service. And certainly we need to track performance metrics, and certainly we need to understand performance across the board in various types of municipal operations. But as expressly laid out, what I understand that I would like to get out of this, and what staff have started off saying, is talking about those items, when we talk about a level of service, something which requires or is up for a governance decision in order to adjust with respect to the budget. So those two things are, in my view, different, and they're both, it's not one's more important than the other. But what we're discussing tonight is levels of service, and I would like to see us tighten the list of information that we've gotten here, because some of these things would maybe go into the realm of a performance metric. Some things here are not up for debate as far as adjustment, but there are items on here that would be more appropriate for a governance level decision on levels of service specifically. So that's what I think we're trying to get to. So I appreciate Councillor Watson's motion. I think that kind of interest, we're talking benchmarking performance metrics against other similar sized municipalities. I think interesting and valuable information, not specifically the item that we're discussing here tonight. And I'd like to get this, I do agree with tightening the list down and trying to get something more focused, keeping our eyes on the idea of levels of service discussion that are appropriate for a governance decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you. I'll make it brief. My only comment on assessing the quality or qualitative side of all of these things is the other piece that you have to manage so carefully, and that's the expectations of the community. And so when you say we will, just as an example, we'll remove all graffiti within 48 hours, then you better do that. And I think we have to be really careful about the commitments we make around the expectations in the community. So I think we also have to be realistic. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
I wonder if a motion that I can hear that there's right now, I understand that would be a big piece of work. I wonder if it's a lesser piece of work to ask staff to really think more about performance, developing some performance standards or indicators that are just related to our own community. Benchmarking, which is a slightly different exercise, but the idea of tightening down and then telling the community that these are 15, 18 or 20 things that we aspire to do, that is maybe it's a select number of these, and then that's an exercise to try and figure out what they would be. But maybe that would be a better ask of staff, because it does then address Councillor Smart and Appleton's and concerns that and yours too, that we need to be able to say to our public, here are the things that we're really aspiring to do. So I would be, if people think that would work, I could recraft this motion.
I think probably, since the motion's on the floor, what we should do is take the vote on this motion, and then we can move on from there. So I will call the question on the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Everyone opposed. Okay. Okay, I'll look to you again, Councillor Watson, if you'd like to craft something else that you think might have more of an appetite for us.
Yeah, let's try this. It's going to be a little bit different. That staff develop a set of do we want to say a number? A limited set of performance standards or indicators based on a sort of sorry, I should say, a select group of performance standards or indicators extracted from the operational service levels appendix 1 that's been presented tonight as a way to for the purpose of public reporting to council and the public.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm not sure if, is there a seconder for that? Okay, Councillor Smart seconded. Did staff understand that, or
It's a little different.
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think one of the challenges for staff in that situation would be selecting it on council's behalf.
Right.
If some perhaps direction could be provided in terms of what types of things council is looking for, that would be helpful. I guess one of the things that's going through my mind is just in terms of reporting back on the implications of this in terms of a budgeting and staff perspective. Would recommend that council seek a project backgrounder so that we can spell that out, and that project backgrounder would also allow us to check in with council to make sure that we're properly understanding the scope of the exercise, and it would give council an opportunity to have a discussion about the scope of that exercise such that the motion now could stay at a fairly high level, and then we'd bring it back for council's further discussion at a later point.
Yeah, I was going to make that suggestion again, is to ask for a project backgrounder on that.
Okay.
So if we could perhaps amend that, or would you like to?
Now, let me try again. That staff prepare a project backgrounder on a set of, on the development of a set of performance standards or indicators for reporting to council and the public.
I think that one sounds a bit better. So yes, seconded by Councillor Smart. Councillor Green.
I just have a question for staff through you, Chair. How would this, what would be the interrelationship then between a set of standards, as Councillor Watson has described, and our own priorities? So what is that interrelationship or that dynamic? Thank you.
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, through the chair. So if council were to ask for that project backgrounder, we would develop that and then bring it back for you probably mid-year when we're planning to have another touch point with you with respect to the council priorities, and then you could consider how that project backgrounder related to some of your other projects and how you wish to prioritize it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Appleton, then Watson. Oh, sorry, Watson. Councillor Watson, you made the motion, so I should let you speak first. Sorry.
Yes, and I just wanted to say it's not in that language, but I think when I was thinking about this, that extracting the right ones as a council exercise or with staff support, staff's help, legislated or non-discretionary items would not really be part of that, in my view, because we have no control over the requirement. So I'd be interested to actually hear commentary on that as we're thinking about it, because I could always amend the motion.
And I just want to check with staff. We did have a motion on the table, and then we put another motion on the table. So I just want to clarify how we deal with that.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. The first motion was not seconded. And I'm not sure that this one was actually seconded.
I think
Point of
I think
clarification,
Councillor
I did
Smarts- yeah,
second.
she did second both of
Thank
those
you.
motions, actually.
Oh, I didn't catch that first
Yeah,
one.
the first one she did also, I believe, yeah.
So the first motion, it can be withdrawn?
So I think that if that's agreeable between Councillor Watson and Councillor Smart, the first motion was withdrawn, and then we're on the second motion, and Councillor Smart did second the second motion. And Councillor Watson, you were looking for some clarification, sorry.
Yes, it would probably be maybe for even a question for staff. In thinking about this, as you laid out in the report, some of these are safety related, or Councillor Appleton kind of did the summary. Some are non-discretionary, and some just describe where we're at and feed into or are reflective of council priorities. And in thinking about creating indicators, would it, you know, in that work or even in preparing the background, or would it be necessary, you know, it's kind of putting you on the spot, to even think about the non-discretionary ones, because they're kind of beyond our, you know, council's control even in a way.
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. If council were to direct us to go and prepare a project backgrounder, there's been quite fulsome discussion here tonight. We would take into context all of that fulsome discussion within the context of whatever direction council provides. And then, of course, there's a further opportunity for council to set the record straight if we've misunderstood council's intent when we bring back the project backgrounder.
Thank you so much. Councillor Appleton, I believe you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to, I think this might be a question for Councillor Watson, is moving that, like, I thought that I heard the language used standards, like performance standards, I think was the word that got used. And again, I want to create clarity between performance metrics or performance standards and levels of service. Like the matter before us is levels of service, and I think that I'm generally in support of what's being presented here, but I would really like the language to refer specifically to levels of service, because that is what we're talking about here, and that's what the individual line items are. And so, again, standards is kind of a bit of a different discussion in my view than levels of service, because again, we want to, the outcome of this should be a refined list of levels of service components that council can review from a governance perspective, is my understanding. So just wondering whether that could be clarified as far as language.
Councillor Watson, do you want to deal with that?
Thank you for that commentary, Councillor Appleton. I understand what you're asking. I think that what is not captured in levels of service as presented tonight is anything qualitative. And I think that there is a qualitative element and not just a quantitative one when we want to report out to the public. So that's why I changed the language a little bit. I think it's the amount of service, but it's also how it's done. It's not just that we mowed X number of feet of lawn. It's, you know, it's that we did it according to the advertised schedule and other things. So I think it's slightly more complex than just these service level numbers, I would say. So that's my response to your query.
Okay, any other discussion on this? Councillor Patterson.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Appleton, I think more so than, because that's my understanding of the service levels. And so to me, service levels would be categorized as mandatory, essential, maybe traditional municipal services, and then other discretionary. So that's levels of service. And once we could get agreement on what the levels of service are that best suits this community, then you would move forward to the next step. And these don't have to occur in a linear fashion. They can occur concurrently. So once we have the levels of service that we feel are the right grouping, then it would be establishing performance indicators as to how we were performing relative to our goal, the goals of council and the community and staff, with the capacity we have. So I do think it's a two-stage process. So I'm also sticking with service levels.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then I'm going to call the question on the motion. All in favor? Councillor Smart, Green, Watson, and Braithwaite in favor, and opposed? Councillor Patterson and Appleton opposed. Thank you. Okay, have we finished with this item? Councillor Watson.
I would like to move a motion that relates to 5 in the staff report. And my motion is that council approve a reduction in our annual survey to be a biannual survey.
Seconded by Councillor Green. Any cause to motivate, Councillor Watson? It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yes, I think it is. It's a cost saving, and I just think it'll be perhaps even more effective being done every 2 years than being done every year.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, acting mayor, to staff, I wondered if I could just have some clarity around the existing surveys. So I just heard every 2 years instead of every 1 year, but then I thought this was 3 times per council term. Okay. Okay. So I guess I would just comment that I won't be supporting the motion because I do think a yearly check-in is very helpful.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Green.
Yes, very quickly. I think in every other way, I would not support this if I didn't think that we were going to be doing more fulsome community engagement in like a town hall, neighborhood meetings, that kind of thing. So if those were not on the table and it was only once every 2 years for a survey, I would not be as supportive, but I am because I know that we are going to be engaging the community in another way, which also allows for dialogue, which I think is important.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton, and then Patterson, then Smart.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So can I get a point? This is an interesting discussion. I'd just like to clarify maybe with the mover of the motion and maybe also with staff. This implies every 2 years. Right now we do this 3 times during the council term, not in the initial part of the council term, but then 3 times every year thereafter. I would be potentially interested in entertaining a bi-yearly survey provided that there were 2 occurrences of it during the council term. So that I think is different. It's not every 2 years, but rather twice, 2 opportunities within a given council term. If it happened every 2 years, it might happen it would depend on scheduling. I guess staff would take our direction on scheduling, but I could support a biannual survey provided that 2 instances arrived within the same council term, if council understands.
So it could be like year 2 and year 4. Yeah. And I think that could be assumed within that motion from staff.
Thank you, Your Worship. Typically, we have done it in year 1 as an opportunity for council to check in on council priorities that are set very early on in the mandate in December or January following the election, and then there's been an opportunity to check in on those council priorities in the June following that review. Typically, we've tried to stay away from having the annual questionnaires in the election year, deeming the election itself to be the questionnaire in essence. So if we were to do it consistently with past practice and move to a kind of a every 2 years basis, then it would be in years 1 and 3.
Thank you, and that's okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Patterson, then Smart.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'm happy to support that. I quite honestly, I think there's a little bit of survey fatigue going on. And we have so many issues that we are canvassing the community for. And I really think that doing the 3 is too short. It's too short a time period to really expect people to give us a fulsome. So I think twice in the council term is a good happy medium.
Thank you, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation around the table and having further clarification, knowing that it would be in year 1 and 3 and that we're not reducing it to 1 questionnaire per council period. I am in support of the motion around the table.
Great. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Appleton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question to staff, just with respect to the motion that was made for the project backgrounder and the material that would come back. There are some components of the existing staff report recommendations that talk about sort of directing annual reporting. I assume that the backgrounder coming back, as far as the motion that was endorsed by council, still essentially is done with the idea that it could prepare for or set the stage for some degree of annual reporting. We would scope that down and still leave the door open for annual reporting.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that backgrounder would come back likely late June, early July of this year. So this year's annual report, we continue on with the status quo, and then the intent would be once Council provides direction on how to proceed, and we've completed whatever direction Council has provided, then we would then there'd be an opportunity to amend the annual reporting per whatever Council direction provides at that point. If I may, Your Worship, there's just the previous motion talked about year 1 and 3 being the annual questionnaire. We just completed the year 2 annual questionnaire, which was following the year 1 questionnaire. So I don't know if Council can provide some direction to staff as to whether you wish us to complete an annual questionnaire in year 3 of next year, which would be immediately preceding the year 2 survey. Just thought I would mention that.
That's a great question. Anybody have any comments on that? Councillor Appleton?
I would make a motion to that effect, Chair, that for the 2025 year be included in the public questionnaire, with the schedule to then thereafter follow the schedule as moved and endorsed by Council.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Smart, thank you. Any conversation on that? No? Okay, so all in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Watson is opposed. No, Oh, sorry, you're in favor. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Watson's in favor. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. That was a great conversation around item 4.1. Let's now move on to item 4.2. And I'm going to hand it over to, it's about the council priorities. I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Bay once again.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is our annual check-in on the priority projects. I mentioned before we'll do kind of a check-in light with just kind of an update on where we're at with your council priority projects mid-year. But this is the biggie. This is where we present all the background information and the status reports, as well as providing a fulsome review of the long list and all the other projects that are underway. So during the first 2 years of council mandate, much has been achieved. You have given us 34 council priority projects. 16 of those are complete or almost complete, and a further 8 have been started. So more than halfway down the list, halfway through the council term. Attachment 1 of your reports lets you know where staff are at with advancing the projects you assigned for 2024. That attachment also itemizes the projects that are in the queue and our understanding of the direction you've provided in previous years, because when you reviewed this last year, you looked not just at the work to be assigned for 2024, but also the work to be assigned for 2025 and 26. So with that, at that time, you assigned essentially 2 years worth of projects. So the 2024 year was filled and the 2025 year was filled. So there is capacity for new projects in 2026 and beyond. And the report provides you with information to support you in determining which projects you'd like to pursue next. The directors representing the various teams that are undertaking the work are available tonight to answer any questions you might have, either with respect to the work that you've already assigned and providing status updates on those, and also, of course, the projects that are proposed to be completed by the departments. So that, Chair, concludes my introductory comments.
Thanks so much. So I think we're going to, once again, come to this table for questions of staff, go to the public, and then come back to this table for our decisions. So I think the decisions that we're looking for: should staff continue to advance the projects council previously identified for advancements in 2025, or does council want to change directions? Does council wish to move any projects from the long list to be actioned as capacity becomes available in 2026 or later? And does council wish to request resourcing information through project backgrounders for any new projects? So please keep that in mind as we come to our decision making. So I'll come to this table first. Would anyone like to start off with questions for staff? Councillor Patterson and Councillor Smart.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was wondering if staff could just elaborate a little bit more on the page 4, the chart, the organizational project capacity, where we have minus numbers. I did get a few questions about net capacity for new projects, -1, -3, and it did say and so it totals -4, and it does say capacity deficit has been temporarily covered by provincial grants funding housing-related projects and shared knowledge project. I'm wondering if staff could just elaborate a little bit, clarify that a little bit more for me.
So sorry, Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Chair. So the project capacity column is really how many projects that department would have capacity for. And then the second column talks about how many projects are actually assigned, and then the net capacity is how we get the minus numbers, because in some cases the capacity is less than the number of projects that have been assigned. What I was trying to express with that third column, the net column is that while the number is a negative, it's not a concern to staff at this point, because that additional capacity has been shored up, or that need for that additional capacity has been shored up by external grants. What we didn't want to do was artificially increase that number in that first column, because it's a short-term propping up, it's not a long-term. So if we indicated that capacity was there and the next year came back and said, well, wait a minute, last year you had capacity for 14 projects, how come this year you only have capacity for 10 projects? So we really wanted to just highlight the fact that was a temporary shoring up based on the grant.
Thanks for that explanation. Then I have Councillor, I think Smart was next.
Thank you, through Acting Mayor, probably to Ms. Bay. I just had a couple questions around Council Party Project number 35, and I know we've seen that. I believe we've seen that project backgrounder before, and I just wanted to, because it's been a while since we saw that, just understand, does that project currently include the recommendations from the Cool Kit final report that we haven't yet seen at the council table? Like, would that project be seen to incorporate things like the recommended grant program and other recommendations that fell out of that report? I'm just wondering if they are in that bucket, or if another bucket needs to be created for that. Thank you.
Ms. Bay, you'd like to direct this question to?
Thank you, Chair. If I could direct that question to Mr. Bull, please.
Mr. Bull, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Chair. I would need to look up some notes here to see what's what. So specifically, could you repeat what element of work you were looking for?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The first one I mentioned was the Cool Kit final report that has been published, but I don't think has come publicly to the council table yet. And it did include a number of recommendations. One of them, I believe, being a grant program. There were a few other recommendations I don't have at my fingertips right now. I just wanted to make sure the recommendations from that report didn't get lost, and I was anticipating they might be part of a climate action plan, but didn't want to assume.
Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, if I understand correctly, that report is still to come, right? So at the same time, the Council Project 35 hasn't started yet either. So I think we need to look into that then. We still need to scope the climate action plan as well. So I think as long as the Cool Kit program report comes back to Council ahead of time, we can make sure that when the scope is confirmed for the climate action plan, that could be included, or as Council wishes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, to perhaps any staff member that could answer the question of when we could expect to see the Cool Kit final report come to the council table.
Thank you. I think I'll go to Mr. Meikle. Yeah, Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Stephen Shepard from UBC did present to council back in, I believe it was June or July, which was essentially the presentation of the final report. The written report can be distributed to council at any time. We can do that, or if you would like to invite Dr. Shepard back to present to council with the final report, that can also be arranged.
Thanks, Mr. Meikle. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I don't mean to get off on too much of a tangent, but through you, acting mayor to staff, I just want to know how can, I don't feel like I necessarily need a presentation, but what is the opportunity for council to further or not further the recommendations from the Cool Kit final report? Because I don't feel like that has come forward to us in a way that we could decide whether or not to proceed with the recommendations.
I'm assuming it's when that report comes back, but I'll look to staff for that direction. Ms. Williams.
Sorry. Thank you, Acting Mayor. Certainly, if council wants anything on that report to come to council, a request can be made of staff. The presentation was provided to council, and the final report was provided by email, if I recall correctly, and posted on the Cool Kit site. So certainly, if council wishes to see the report come back, we would take that direction.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, I wonder if you could recommend, because I don't want to get us too off track with this today, would the appropriate time potentially to do that be at new business at the end of this meeting?
I think probably we could do it after we take care of all of the motions that have to do with this item, and then I think at the end we could do something like that, if you like. Okay. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Smart?
I do. Thank you. Through Acting Mayor to staff, I just perhaps to Mr. Bull, I just wanted to ask again about the community climate action plan backgrounder and whether it included the deconstruction bylaw or deconstruction incentives that have come up a few times in the last year at the council table. And I understand that it's part of a council priority project, and I just wanted to confirm that the potential for any incentives to deconstruct rather than demolish your house, is that part of the council priority project number 35? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bull.
Through you, Chair, I can't confirm that just yet, but I think if there's a council motion on it, I don't think there's a specific council motion on it. But if this is a topic that is important to council, it might show up in the scoping of the project, or it could be added by council at the time that the project sign-off is presented to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Smart.
Thank you so much. I guess my next question would just be with regards to the village planning that has been pushed further into our council term. There was, through you, Acting Mayor, to staff, there was some discussion of potentially utilizing the same consultant for the OCP as our village planning. I'm just wondering if any integration of the village planning can happen with our OCP. Has any further thought come into that? Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll go to Mr. Bull again.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Yeah, we haven't looked into that further. Council did confirm the scope for the official community plan project in September. As we discussed then, there is a few elements of the whole land use discussion we'll need to have next year that will inform the village area plan, but it will stop short of actually including village area plan specific work that was planned for later. And the main reason for that is that the timeline for this OCP update is really tight. It's a 1-year project, very compressed. So there is the land use, general land use framework will be discussed next year, and it does extend to the village areas, of course, in that way. But the follow-up for specific village area planning, either by area or specifically about streetscape, is something for that will need to be done later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, to staff. My next question is about the one engineering and public works project indicated to come up this year. And my question is because we haven't seen this at the council table yet, and we don't know if, I believe this is going to come to council soon. And so, for instance, if it comes next week or the week after, and not knowing what we're going to see, if council decides for some reason to delay or not to proceed with it right away, would there then be an understanding that we could revisit what that capacity of engineering and public works might be? It just seems strange to confirm that as a priority when we haven't seen anything yet.
I'll go to Director Rennick for this.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, we did note that a council project sign-off was expected by year-end 2024. However, it is much more likely that that council project sign-off will occur in early 2025, as the councillor noted. The district was successful in receiving grant funding for a small portion of this project for the design cost, and so we would still recommend that the engineering department undertake that design exercise. And council could make a decision at project sign-off time or once the design is completed, whether or not to actually proceed with the construction phase of that project.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question through you, Acting Mayor. So perhaps my expectation that we might have seen some initial designs at the end of this year is not correct. From what I'm understanding, we would just be receiving a project backgrounder and the design has not even commenced. I just wanted to clarify.
I think that's what we heard. Mr. Rennick.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Just one more question, and I appreciate the patience. So this is a question through you, Acting Mayor, with regards to the finance and asset management category. I just wanted to clarify with the comprehensive asset management plan project 25/38. If this is a project that is going to take in that sort of 25-30 year outlook that would inform the generational spending decisions on facility projects from Carnarvon Park to protective services, but beyond, like public services building, future projects, so that when we're making a decision about how much to spend on the Carnarvon Park project, we're making it in the context of a generational spending plan. And I just wanted to clarify if I had my expectations correct with that project. Thank you.
Ms. LaChance.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Chair. Excuse me. Thank you very much for the question. Would like to maybe step back to answer that question. Our work on the comprehensive asset management plan activities, developing our program, increasing maturity, will include levels of service on each of our asset systems. Typically, we're designing that level of service analysis based on the life of the asset. In direct, response to the question, 30 years is quite possible when the life of the system is going to be tied to that 30 years. In some cases, our linear assets are multi-generational. They will be in place for more than one generation, and we would factor that in. I would like to also add that this council priority project, of course, we have a project sign-off on that. It's for some of the program activities and not all. So this would be continuing work we would do. So while contained in here are some work around facilities specifically and the work that's underway. There would be ongoing work on that in future years. And then I would just also like to add that on this particular project, we would be coming back to council with a status update in Q1 of 2025.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, just one clarification to staff. So I guess I just wanted to clarify, would it include really a capital project sustainable funding plan? Because I heard a lot about operational level of service, and I just wanted to clarify if it would actually sort of include that capital project plan asset management. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaChance.
Through you, Acting Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I would like some help to clarify the question. I'm not sure I understand.
Certainly, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Because I heard the terms about service levels and operations, but I didn't hear the word capital. I just wanted to clarify again my expectations of what that project scope is. Is it actually going to include an anticipated cost to replace and renovate facilities that are aging over the next 25 to 30 years so that we can, as a council, make informed decisions around the table with regards to how much it's going to cost to replace various different major projects really over a generation to ensure that we're not spending too much on say the first few projects and therefore putting our community at risk of not having planned in a generational viewpoint to afford all of the aging facilities that are going to need attention over the next 30 years.
Ms. LaChance.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor. Yes. So short answer is yes. If you take the facilities as an example, condition index on those buildings would be coming back. There's a plan in place to do a number of those each year, which would inform council about how to prioritize those respective facilities. Additional to that, and I believe it began last year, within the financial plan documents, life cycle cost estimates are included for some of those major capital decisions, which helps to inform that ongoing costing and prioritization.
Thank you. Councillor Smart, do you have anything else?
That's everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I next have Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Mayor. I just have a couple of questions probably for Mr. Bull, if you might, and they relate to project number 76 and project number 7. And the first question is, just would you confirm that OCP update has to be completed, statutorily required to be completed by the end of 2025? Is that correct?
Mr. Bull.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Councillor Watson.
So just with that in mind, I'm wondering about the suggestion is that project number 7, which is long time coming, which is to update the zoning bylaw. The suggestion in front of us is that work not begin until possibly 2028. And I'm just wondering what the sort of ramifications of that are from a service level perspective to the development community and owners when there would be this long lag. I mean, really long lag, because we haven't done anything with that bylaw for, I think maybe it's 2014, maybe even longer. And so I'm just thinking about, again, a 2025 new OCP, and then no adjustments to the zoning bylaw for 3 more years. It seems like a long time to me. So I am thinking about that as maybe a priority that I would like to shift, but I just would like some perspective on that.
That's one of the questions that I actually have too. So, Mr. Bull.
Thank you for the chair. Let me see. There are changes going to be made to the zoning bylaw next year, but they will be focused on the required changes around housing and planning for the housing needs for the next 20 years. So specifically, that would probably extend to new multifamily zones, or for whatever zone is needed to accompany new OCP designations for future growth. And those changes are beyond infill housing. Because this year, we did make substantial changes to the zoning bylaws and simplifications, but mainly in the new program, the infill housing program, is in there. Now, it's not a new zoning bylaw, of course, so we're still layering onto a zoning bylaw that dates back to 1986. That's very old. Extremely old. However, to completely get a new zoning bylaw in place, that's a bigger project. And that's been the background of why it is marked as a council priority project, but also why it's planned further out. Because we do expect to be very busy with the housing work next year, the optimization of development processes, climate action planning, And that's the background to it. So the good news is some changes can be made next year, and if there's anything in the zoning bylaw that is or in the way as a known barrier, perhaps, some of those were addressed for info housing this year already, I would think. So next year I don't expect that drastic changes. But unfortunately, it does mean that before we can embark on a project to have a brand new zoning bylaw, I will need to wait. Thank you.
It makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, but I should acknowledge, yes, a lot of work was done to amend the zoning bylaw this year in order to meet the requirements of Bill 44. So I shouldn't have suggested that no changes have been made, but just not that modernization of the zoning bylaw, which is a long time overdue, I would say. So just to follow up, we had a project that was called, I think, Update Home-Based Business Requirements. And it got so far, and then it sort of got slid into project number 7, I think. And I just wanted to make sure that we don't lose track of that. So I just, it's a question to staff, could we update this list? If that really is in number 7, I think that's a kind of it's got more substance than just modernizing the bylaw. It actually means making some changes to the regulatory regime. So I'd like to know about that, please.
I'll actually go to Ms. Bay for this one.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that was one of the ones that Council operationalized last year, so that there's a Council resolution to complete that. It's just not on this Council priority list.
Thank you, Ms. Bay. And does that mean that any changes we could count on them, the zoning bylaw being updated if they're required? Because there's a component there, which is like maybe a bigger exercise. There's setting the new framework and then actually amending the bylaw. That's all part of the project?
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, I'd like to defer to Mr. Bowl for the
Bowl.
details on that project.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to check something because I have a recollection that it might have been combined with the upcoming OCP project, but we have to double check that. Yeah, it was a package of work that there were several options for that, if you might recall, tiers of options for home-based business regulations. And it was planned or asked for to follow up on that next year, I'm pretty sure. So, but I would need to check my notes for a moment if I can, please.
Thank you. Yes,
Thanks.
we can come back to that. Councillor Watson, did you have any other questions? No? Councillor Green or Appleton, would you like to weigh in at all? Councillor Green and then Appleton.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, just for clarity, the blasting bylaw, it isn't on any of these lists. I just wondered where it might be and what its status is at the moment. I know there was a survey conducted, et cetera, but just wondering where it is reflected. Thank you.
I'll go to Ms. Bay for that one, I think, or yes, Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not super familiar with that one, but what I'm gathering from the whispers in my ears here is that it came to council and that it was sent back, and it was sent back, I think, for more information, for more consultation. Your Worship, I have the direction here. It's that staff be directed to gather additional public input on the proposed blasting changes outlined in blasting regulation changes consultation summary and next steps dated March 18th, 2024 through Connect Oak Bay. And then in September, there's a note from our Director of Planning saying that consultation will be starting mid-September to mid-October, followed by reporting back to Council before year end. And then, yeah, and that's it. That's all there is.
So it will be coming back to us before a year. And so if it comes back, that'll have to be the next meeting. So I'm Mr. Bull.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can give you an update on that. Yeah, we closed off the consultation. We have results, of course. We're compiling the results. But I do have limited availability of the consultant work on this, so it won't be coming back this year just yet. But it is being worked on, and I hope to report back to you in January or February on that topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Appleton, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. I just got a bit of an oblique question with respect to item priority session number 79, which is under section 2, and responding to increased development interest. So again, with building and planning. Granted that there's a staffing component to this to support the additional interest, I'm just wondering whether staff could elaborate on sort of when they would see that item being moved into category 1 as essentially being substantively complete. Like, are we tracking a specific type of metric that allows us to assess that we have properly responded to increased development interest, and what does that look like in practice?
Thank you. Mr. Boole.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That project is, the way we have treated it so far is a bit of a reservation for additional staffing if the need arises. So far there's a commentary in the report about some resources being used, and that is correct, but the majority of the budget for that particular project is still kind of ready to be used, and likely what we intend to do is anticipating that the volume of implications will increase over time now with the new program in place for infill, but with other land use regulation coming for other types of housing, we think there will be an increase to a higher level of activity. So then this funding would be used to create a bit of a graduation, so to say, so to be able to have staffing resources available early, and then graduate the resources that needed for the long run to regular either revenue funded funding or otherwise. So most of that budget is still in the bank, so to say. So it's not quite a completed project at this time. It's going to be interesting to see this year, next year, and the year after what the volume of applications will do, because that's when we probably rely on this particular funding to action or to respond to that increased interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair. So then, and I appreciate that from staff. So through you, sort of picking up on the same idea, in category 3 for plan to be started, we also have 78, which is optimizing development processes. So I'm just wondering how that would, maybe that just sort of the metrics around that, the sort of components that would constitute an optimized development process. As mentioned that the consultant is supporting that process. What do we anticipate is sort of the I don't know whether there's necessarily a product associated with that, but based on Mr. Bull's comments that he just made, what does the process end point, or at least what is a, there's no finish line on this, but what does a substantive completion look like on that component?
Thank you. Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, that project takes place in 2 phases. The first phase is underway, and there is kind of a strong or a strict deadline to it because of the funding requirements. That one is grant funded, or we received a grant for it, I should say, and we are applying that grant, of course, to the work. And that's by the end of May, and that will result in an overview or of recommended changes that will be presented to Council. It gives Council an opportunity to pick and choose what are the priorities for you, what should be actioned. That will also allow us at that point to report and scope with Council sign off on phase 2 of the project. And tentatively, that phase 2 would probably be somewhere 6 to 12 months, following up on that May report or June report. And it would pinpoint a number of changes that will be made either to processes or to systems perhaps. And phase 2 would then see to making some more significant changes, I would anticipate, as opposed to some of the incremental ones that we have been working on already. So by the end of that phase 2, which would be later in 2025, perhaps early 2026, we would see some of those more significant changes being made and implemented, and a report back to Council again to close off that particular phase of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Anything else? Okay, my questions actually were asked, the 2 questions that I had. You've spoken once already, Councillor Patterson. I'll go to Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And through you, just to staff, whoever can best answer this, I have a couple of questions about previously long-listed things that were on Council priorities that may have changed. And that, so that's on page 14. Number 8 was identify how to prevent or reduce building and infrastructure loss from earthquakes, tsunamis, sea level rise, etc. I am wondering if there are components of that that will be covered under the Emergency Disaster Management Act. So I'm thinking perhaps our fire chief can speak to it.
Chief McDonald. Welcome back.
Your Worship, Councillor Patterson. So just to clarify, you're looking under number 8 for additional clarification on whether the new EDMA legislation will provide, is it guidance with regards to building infrastructure related to seismic, tsunami, and sea level rise. Is that correct? I think going back a little bit to the conversation I think we had last year is I think we were looking for some further clarification from council on the specifics about whether this is more on the seismic side or whether it's related to sea level rise. In regards to whether EDMA provides direction in some of these areas, again, the regulations to support EDMA are not yet released and are not anticipated to come out for another 2 to 5 years. So as much as the legislation is there on the regulatory side, we don't know yet on how that's going to be applied. There is definitely grant funding that is applicable to some of these aspects, but on how we would go about applying for the grant and what exactly the technical issue is that we're trying to resolve on whether it's seismic infrastructure upgrades or whether it's to address sea level rise, again, are 2 different areas where I think we would be looking for additional direction from council, and then whether it comes down to an emergency management lens or whether it's more of an engineering and planning side.
Is that all, Councillor Patterson?
And I have one other question. Number 17 on that list was identify options for improving solid waste management at Elgin Road. And given the discussions we've had of late about some of the challenges with the availability of space at Elgin Road, I was wondering if this might be partially operationalized in staff's considerations for the coming year.
Question, Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, yes, I would say that some elements of number 17 are operationalized by prior direction that was given by this council at Committee of the Whole earlier in November.
Thank you. I will say that it looks to me like there's a lot of community building and planning. It's community building and planning heavy on this, and so I know that we are. We've been looking for to increase the capacity within that department, and we had, I believe, agreed to hire 3 new individuals in community building and planning. Is that correct? Was that in the budget last year? Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Chair. You might be referring to the climate planner would be one that was approved a little bit longer time ago, I think last year, September. That person has been hired and is now in place since as of October. And then this year's budget, there was an approval for 1 development planner and half admin assistant support. Or at least we briefed you about it, and it was part of a bigger discussion of funding. For the admin assistant, recruiting is in process, so it's got delayed for a number of reasons. For the development planner capacity, we're still looking at options and also at timelines of what is the best way of making sure we get staff in for the right amount of time, but also have sufficient funding in the long run and those kind of considerations. Thank you.
I guess the reason I'm asking a question is that if we don't get those staff people, does that then affect, how does that then affect the items that are on this list?
Thank you, Chair. The 2 remaining positions don't directly affect council priority projects because those are, it's a different staff team with a different scope of work, more operationally focused. So in terms of the council priority capacity, with the climate planner now in place, we have all the planned in-house capacity available to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go to the public, which I'm pretty sure there's no one in the chambers again, and it doesn't look like there's anyone online. So then I'm going to come back to this table. I just want to say that to begin off the conversation, I think that we should really celebrate that we have completed 16 of the 32, and there's 8 more underway. I think staff need to be commended for that. So thank you. I'm not sure how that stacks us up against other municipalities who have priorities, because I don't necessarily look at other communities' priorities, but I'm assuming that it puts us really at in the lead as far as that kind of thing goes. So kudos to staff on that. I'd like to say that before we get the conversation started. So I'm going to come back to this table, and it looks to me, just like, let me get to my computer broke down there, so let me just get here. It looks like, I think maybe what we'll do first is we'll make our motion to receive. So moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That's carried. And then I'll look at some recommendations. So I think really what we're looking at, as I said before, is should staff continue to advance the projects that we previously identified? Is there any projects that we might wish to move from the long list to become as capacity becomes available for 2026 or later? And do we wish to request any resourcing information through project backgrounders for any new projects? So, anybody? Councillor Green.
Thank you. I just wanted to reference, sorry, I'm just going to the back page under potential new projects, and that was number 82 and 86. And I just wondered, there are a number of them on the previous page as well at the bottom, establishing a heritage procedures bylaw, etc. And I know we've began some of that work. I just wondered, I appreciated the commentary opposite number 82, which says, assuming bylaw development in consultation with property owners, if this is not assigned as a staff project, it may be possible to explore asking the Heritage Commission to volunteer to take on aspects of this work. I think the Heritage Commission is an untapped resource at this point. I think there is more capacity there to assist with the heritage-related projects. So that's just a point I'd like to make, that I would encourage staff to look more closely at the Commission as a resource to assist with this work, because I know it's important. I also know that there's a real priority, and I'll tell you why. What really prompted it was the demolition of the 2 homes on Beach Drive recently. That really shocked the community, and it shocked not just our community, but other communities outside Oak Bay. So I think that raised the profile of the need to really be vigilant about this whole area, more so than maybe we have been. And under new housing legislation and the pressure for density, I think it becomes even more critical. So that's all. I just wanted to point that out. And I appreciate the consideration by staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Yeah, number 82 was on my radar as well, for potentially bringing something forward. So who would like to make any other comments or any other suggestions? Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. I'm overwhelmingly in support of proceeding as planned. There were 2 small recommendations I wanted to share and potentially make motions on. And I'll just mention what they are, and then I could proceed with recommendations if there's some consensus around the table. One of them was with regards to when we have, I understand the project number 35, developing the community climate action plan. It will be coming to us in the first quarter next year. And I wanted, now that we have a climate staff person, to ask staff to consider adding project 30, which is the project around car share in our community, to potentially consider the impacts of including that in the climate action plan. So that was one thing I was interested in bringing forward, especially with the delay in acquiring our senior transportation planner and potential delays with our active transportation. If we can move forward something with regards to the car-free lifestyle that so many of our residents want. The other item I was interested in bringing forward was with regards to Parks, Recreation, and Culture. I see the option I see that Project 18 is in there for preparing an options analysis for a temporary off-leash dog park. As a dog owner, of course, I am very interested in that, but the other project I also would like to see, and I would question whether or not is more of a priority, is the Bowker Creek project 26/55, which is the extension of the pathway across towards B Street. And I question that the impact of that would also be really great for our community. So I just wanted to bring that up as a potential, is that have more of a potential benefit to our community. So those were the two small tweaks that I was looking at, but in general, I'm very excited to proceed as planned.
Thank you. Anyone else want to bring anything forward that we would have for discussion? Councillor Watson.
Yes, this is really pretty minor, I think, but I would like to suggest that for that zoning bylaw update or amendment or rewrite, that we actually say 2027 instead of perhaps in 2028. That would give some little, sigh of relief in the building and planning after all the work that will precede it. But I just don't. I think leaving it till 2028 or even beyond is too long.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Patterson or Appleton? No? Okay. Well, that's great, because that's not a lot that we might have to change. Councillor Green, sorry.
Sorry, just a question on procedure. Do you want us to make motions on the ones we'd like to move forward?
Yeah, I think if you look under on the chart under council direction, there are motions there already. So I think what would be appropriate at this time, if you choose, is on page 1. If you agree with that motion there, we could put that motion on the table first for the almost completed council priority plan projects. If you would like to move that one first, Councillor Green.
I will move the motion. Would you like me to read it?
Do we need to read it out, staff, or is it okay just to? No? Okay. So it'll be the motion, if council agrees, these projects, that motion. So that's on the table. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smart, second. Any reason to motivate Councillor Green, or you want to go straight to?
No, I think everyone seems to be in agreement, so I'll take a risk and see what happens. Thank you.
Councillor Smart, you'd like a comment, and Councillor Watson?
Thank you. Just a clarification. Are we just moving forward the first recommendation that the report be received, or are we also including the recommendation that the proposed adjustments, and then we will make motions? If you could just clarify if we're moving the first paragraph or the second as well.
I think we already made the motion that the report be received, did we not? Yeah. Okay, so just the second part, yeah. Okay, so Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted for clarification. So this essentially is going to move the recommendations as laid out and the council direction recommendation for component number 1. It implies that, or it indicates that project 2728 for active transportation be moved into a capital program. I recall that the original impetus of that active transportation program had a couple of other different components in terms of analysis of the network and some further planning of some components that go beyond the ones that are currently contemplated. So I would prefer to see that sort of left on the almost completed side of things. I understood there to still be some planning work to be done in association with 27 and 28 that go beyond the current projects slated for capital.
Perhaps I can go to Mr. Rennick for that.
I'm sorry, could I request a clarification of the question?
Absolutely. Councillor Appleton.
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. What I'm seeing here is that essentially we're signing off on completion of the components under heading 1 here. under that heading, 2728 is a expedite implementation of the active transportation program. There were a number of components to the active transportation program, including a refresh of the plan itself, identifying options and that sort of thing. In the green wording, it says Project 2728 to become a capital program and that, etc. So it basically implies that expediting the active transportation program is now moved into its capital phase. And there are components of that expedited active transportation program that I understand are moving into the capital phase. But my understanding is that there was still planning and layout work to be done for components of the active transportation plan that were laid out in the revised active transportation plan, but not yet budgeted or actioned. So I'm hesitant to have that expedite implementation of active transportation program moved into completed, because I don't understand that all of the information, all of the components of that expedited program are in fact completed. Some of them are moving to capital, but some are still outstanding. That's my understanding.
Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the clarification. It is a bit of a complicated discussion. It has become a capital program. It does have established capital funding. However, I would not want council to think that all opportunities to provide governance on that project have passed. Council endorsed a number of resolutions with regards to active transportation, such as that default designs be brought back using the all ages and abilities standard. Council also directed that staff prepare designs and engage the community on those projects. However, council still has the opportunity to essentially make the go or no-go decision on each project as it is brought forward to this council. Whether that needs to stay on as a council priority, or whether that can now be considered a capital project, with the understanding that council does still occasionally sign off on the details of capital projects. I think that's a difficult question for me to answer, whether that should stay on this list or whether it can be considered that it can come off because it's a capital project now.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton, I think you have a follow-up there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I appreciate that. And I think I do have a follow-up question, maybe to simplify, to respond to that, is does the movement of this component into, as described here, becoming a capital program, does the capital program that's referenced in that text and in the motion that's on the floor, does the capital program incorporate capital programs, active transportation capital programs, which are currently planned for under design and or funded? Does it also include capital projects for active transportation that have not yet been designed or funded, but are in keeping with the active transportation plan?
Rennick.
Through the chair, yes, the capital plan also includes funds for designing those projects that currently only exist in conceptual phase.
Councillor Patterson, and then Smart.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you, just as a follow-up to that, could we ask Director Rennick to define what we mean by active transportation, everything that is included in that?
Mr. Rennick.
Through the chair, staff's interpretation of active transportation is in line with the BC Active Transportation Design Guidelines, which essentially means any form of human-powered movement, be it cycling, walking, wheeling, strollers, scooters, etc.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I have a separate question, but I do have a quick follow-up through you, Acting Mayor, to the current discussion on the active transportation. And my question is with regards to being that it is currently a council a priority, will staff be bringing forward updates on the schedule? Because particularly, I don't even feel like I have clarity since we approved last year a potential 5-year plan that was then not fully funded and has now potentially experienced delays in staffing. And I don't feel like I even have a clear sense of what the schedule is. So being that it's a council priority project and it may have experienced delays, I would anticipate that staff would proactively bring that back to the council table and that there might be a relevance in keeping it as a council priority project. So my question is with regards to, is that something staff will do, or is that something that we need to bring a motion forward to achieve? Thank you.
Mr. Rennick.
Thank you. Through the chair, council has provided direction that the 9 priority projects that were identified undergo design and consultation by the end of 2025, which we are still on track for. Council also endorsed an implementation timeline of those projects when staff thought it was feasible for which projects will be built 26, 27, 28, etc. And should factors have an impact on that schedule, yes, there will be a project constraint response brought to council for their consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Rennick. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Really appreciate that clarification. So my question through you, Acting Mayor, is with regards to, since we're at the stage where I believe the motion that we have on the table is, and that the 2022-26 council priority themes as referenced in the December 2nd report from the Director of Strategic Initiatives be reaffirmed. I'm still not honestly clear if we're also on the table with the and further that motion. So appreciate that clarification to start.
I think the motion that's on the table is, if you look at your big sheets, it's the that council considers council priority plan project 2728 to have become a capital program, and it ends with and can be considered complete once the projects have been finished.
I appreciate that clarification because I'm looking at the recommendation motions from the first page of the report. Could you just reference what page you're looking at with that wording? Oh, on attachment 1? Thank you. So with that clarification, I appreciate that. And I think it would be helpful if we do read the motions out loud because there are different places where there are different wordings. So my question through you, Acting Mayor, is with regards to Council Priority Plan 45. I just wanted, since we are sort of reaffirming the list here, just to point out that that project has yet to include any diversity in it, and that there are outstanding portions of that, including our youth representative project that I believe is outstanding. So I just wanted to point out that that is nowhere near complete, and that I would really like to see that remain on there, adding the details of the youth representative project that we're anticipating back at the council table. Thank you.
I'll go to staff on this one.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Pardon my throat's a little bit raw at the moment. The accessibility plan. So that did fall under the DEI theme that council had for priority. It was deemed that the one project that was identified under that was for the accessibility committee to be created and an accessibility plan to be completed, which has been completed. It just needs to come to council in January. So when I looked at the project backgrounder for that, it was only for the accessibility plan and the committee. So if any further project were to be identified, it would have to be added by council.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I do appreciate that clarification. I'm a little bit frustrated in the fact that initially that committee was described to be one that would include a diversity and inclusion, and then later up ended being more compact and not including those elements. It is what it is now, but I do strongly feel like we need to look at diversity and inclusion in our community. I do have some motions that will come up later for project backgrounders related to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add? So I'm going to call the question on this particular, Councillor Watson, yes.
Just a follow-up question actually to staff about that, because if I recall, actually, I think it was Councillor Rowland, currently Acting Mayor Braithwaite, who moved the motion about the youth representative on council. And I thought that got, I know it hasn't been done yet, but it got sent somewhere. And I just wonder where it, if it's not on this list as a project, where is that right now?
I'll go to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. That project is in the Corporate Services Work Plan for 2025. It was operationalized.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on this for this resolution.
And a clarification, sorry, I'm still not clear what the motion is.
Okay, I will read the motion out for you. That Council considers Council Priority Plan Project number 2728 to have become a capital program, and that projects number 10, 12, 22, 33, 51, 52, 68, 72, 73 are complete, and that projects 53, 74, 77 will be deemed complete once received or approved by Council, and that projects 21, 42, and 45 can be considered complete once the projects have been finished. I'm going to call the, Councillor Smart.
Sorry, I just want to express that I won't be supporting the motion because I don't feel that all of these projects are complete.
Thank you. I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Smart and Councillor Appleton opposed. Okay, we'll move on to the next page, which is in progress Council Priority Projects. So once again, you'll notice under Council Direction, there is some green wording that has potential resolution wording. Councillor Smart, do you see where we are? Yeah. Okay, so if anybody would like to put a motion on the table on this section, please go ahead. Councillor Watson.
I will move the first green motion. I'll read it out. That staff be directed to continue to advance Council Priorities Plan Projects number 14, 15, 18, 25/38, 34, 79, 80A, and 80B.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? It's Councillor Green. Any conversation around this one? No? Okay. So I then will then call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. And let's move on to the new Council Priority Projects, Section 3. Entertain a motion.
Oh, sorry, yes, my mic's on. I'm happy to continue. I will move that staff be directed to advance Council Priorities Plan Projects numbers 35, 36, 47, 54, 75, 76, and 78 in 2025.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Green. Any discussion on this one? No? Great. I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. On to Section 4, which is planned up to be started in 2026 or later. These council priority projects have already been budgeted for.
And I will move that staff be directed to advance Council Priorities Plan Projects number 9/16, number 26/55, and number 70 once departmental capacity is available through completion of earlier assigned projects.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Appleton. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None. That motion carries. And now we're on to the previously long listed. This is where it's going to become interesting, I think. Okay, so who would like to take a stab at something here? Councillor Watson, your mic's still on if you're... It could be that we don't want to see any here moved forward. But there might be someone here that we do want to see. Councillor Green and then Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I'm not contemplating a motion per se at this point, but I was wondering if there was any appetite in moving forward, actually clustering the heritage pieces. There are, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all interrelated, but clustering those together and moving them to a more expedited timeline. I think there's I think there's a real need to do this, and I've had a lot of feedback from community members about this issue. I think in view of what happened in the last month or so. People, I think it was a stark example of what could happen. And so I would hope that perhaps we could consider bundling these together and then moving them to a shorter time frame. I don't know what that will look like. At the very least, a project backgrounder might be the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. So that to me would be items number 82, 83, 84, 85, and 86, correct?
83, 84, 85, 82, and 86, correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I think that what we would look for there is, if I'm looking at the wording under council direction, it would be that staff be directed to change the timing on projects number 82 to 86 for advancement in 2025, would you say that, in order to advance project, oh, no, that doesn't make sense. Can I just get some clarification? Thanks, Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Chair. If there's a desire to move forward any of these projects, then the middle paragraph in green would be the appropriate one. So you could read that staff be directed to provide funding for projects number, and then whatever projects you wish to be included would be listed there. And then the rest of it would say in the 5-year financial plan, and once funded, list those projects in the council priority plan for initiation in 2026 or beyond. Just noting that there's no capacity in 2025 unless another project comes off. On those particular ones, staff would likely be bringing forward a budget request associated with those then as part of the 5-year financial plan, and they would be included in the council priority plan once the funding associated with those had been provided. I might suggest that the project backgrounders be possibly dealt with separately, as we have already prepared project backgrounders for 82 and 86. Those are part of your package. So depending on how council wants to approach that.
Thank you. So Councillor Green, would you like to make that motion? You might have to read that out if you could. So do you see the part that it is? It's under advancing projects in 2026 to 29, and it starts off with that staff be directed to provide funding for projects, and then list the numbers that you wish.
Thank you. That staff be directed to provide funding for projects numbers 83, 84, 85, 82, and 86. Yes, that's
in the 5-year financial plan.
In the 5-year financial plan, and once funded, list those projects in the council priority plan for initiation in 2026 or beyond.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Watson, thank you. And Councillor Green, do you feel, I think you've motivated a little bit, but if you'd like to motivate some more?
Yes, I think I have. I think, again, as I pointed out, while this would require, additional funding and staff time, the Heritage Commission is an untapped resource that could assist with this work and take some of that pressure and workload off staff. So I would want, hopefully that would be considered as a viable option. And I think this is really important to the community right now, and I think there is some anxiety around the preservation and conservation of heritage buildings because of what happened recently, and also because of the push for density and infill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, did you want to add?
I actually want to make a comment. I know I seconded the motion, but I just wanted to remind council that in terms of what the Heritage Commission recommended in terms of order of priority, it was number 82 and number 86. And the other things were not seen as needing to be done precipitous, so as advanced as quickly, and also that number 84 is a real grab bag of stuff. So I'm not sure that if in supporting this, now, I seconded the motion, but I actually would like to suggest that it may just be at the moment 82 and 86 that we move forward with more expeditiously.
Councillor Green,
I will amend the motion to reflect 82 and 86.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this particular motion? Councillor Smart.
Oh, thank you. I'm very appreciative of this comprehensive report that has been done, and I do want to see all of these kept in our work plan. I was prepared to support 82 tonight, so I'll have to give some thought as to whether I would support this motion. Because are we motioning? Can I just clarify? We're actually motioning to fund these projects. Can I just have that corrected? Thanks.
Staff, is that your understanding that we're motioning to fund these projects?
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, they would be provided for in the budget that's coming forward, if that is Council's direction, especially if we have provided project backgrounders, so we're fairly comfortable with the range of estimates that have been provided there for 82 and 86. We haven't gone through and provided project backgrounders for the others because Council didn't ask for project backgrounders on those. So if Council asked us to provide funding in the 5-year financial plan for 82 and 86, that would come forward in what you see early in the new year, and then once funded, we would add those as projects to the Council priority plan.
Thank you, and it's really helpful to have those budget amounts in there. So 20 to 50,000 for number 82 and 20 to 30,000 for number 86. Thank you. Councillor Appleton, I believe you had a comment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to support the motion on the floor, not because I don't think that it's important, but because, again, this is significant work, but it's also community building and planning who are under significant workload right at the moment. And I do notice, and I appreciate staff's inclusion of this commentary here under the status that potentially the Heritage Commission could volunteer to take on aspects of the work in both 82 and 86. So what I've heard from the liaison is that they see 82, the Commission, and I don't want to speak for them, but they see 82 and 86 as significant and priority items, that there may be some room for them to participate in it. Having been liaison to a number of different committees and commissions, I have heard folks look for that type of work to do, and members of the foundation have also indicated such to me. So I would be more I'm not in favor of including this as a funded item right now. I'd be more in favor of a referral to the Heritage Commission to assess the scope of their ability and their scope of their willingness to take on some aspect of this project and have that as a dedicated discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. When I look at these two pieces of work, just looking at number 82, the comments that we got is that standards of maintenance bylaws to make sure that we preserve what we've already got. So that was important. We create, in effect, a baseline of supported heritage buildings that must meet a certain standard so we don't lose them by neglect. And the second one, 86, was to increase the inventory of heritage designated buildings so that we actually started to pull more things into the fold of sort of the treasured heritage fabric of the community. So I actually, and I also think I saw the staff comment that even if you use consultants, you clearly take up staff time too, because you have to write terms of reference, you have to hire, you have to supervise. But I see that both of these projects are definitely could be done by some of the heritage consultant experts in the community, and could actually happen quite quickly and smoothly. Notwithstanding, you would still have to recruit them, but and that they could be liaising with the Heritage Commission as they do that. So I would still like to continue to bring them forward and assign funding to them for those reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor. And I guess for clarification, I understand why there is a desire to move these forward. And I do agree that there is a lot of knowledge within the Commission and the Foundation that could probably guide a lot of this work. But creating the standards of maintenance, not just creating the standards of maintenance, it's enforcing the standards of maintenance. So as part of this, then, if we're putting it in the budget, we would also, to my mind, have to have some sort of an enforcement, a change in the bylaw enforcement budget to accommodate this also. Is that correct? I'm not sure who can speak to that. Maybe Mr.
Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Good question. If a bylaw would be created like that, there may be, depending on how the bylaw is set up, there might be either a recurring mechanism or is it on complaint basis? That's one of the questions that would need to be answered. How is this enforced or monitored over time? There's not that many properties designated, and most of them, as far as I know, are in a decent shape. But it depends also a bit on what council's direction would be at the time of creating that bylaw. What is the level of ambition to keep track of this? So that would need to be determined through that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the question on this. So all in favor? Councillor Patterson, Green, Watson, and Braithwaite, and opposed? Councillor Smart and Appleton. Thank you very much. I'll entertain if there's someone has another one. I think you had the floor, Councillor Green, if you have any others.
I don't, and thank you.
Okay. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I would like to put forward the following motion that staff be directed to provide funding for project number 30. So project number 30 is on the same page as the motion on page 44 of 241 of my package.
That's the Encourage a Car Share program.
Yes. In the 5-year financial plan, and once funded, list that project in the council priority plan. As it suggested, I could see that this could easily become part of the community climate action plan, but being that it is on this page and list, and this is the process in which we're undertaking, I'd like to move this forward.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Appleton. Do you care to motivate Councillor Smart?
Yeah, thank you. There's so much appetite in our community. We have a large percentage of our residents who already belong to various different car share memberships and are very much looking for all the support they can get from us as a municipality in order to reduce their car usage. And I think it's our job at the council table to do everything we can to support our residents who are doing the hard work to move forward with climate action and to change their lives to help with important climate initiatives.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton, do you have anything to add?
Just that, thank you, Chair. Just that I believe, as Councillor Smart has mentioned, that this could very well be sort of integrated with the ongoing work of the climate planner. So I think that over time, when this was originally put forward, I'm not exactly sure about the timing, but I think when it was originally put forward, we may not have officially endorsed and funded the climate planner position. I could have my timing wrong on that, but certainly I would not presuppose the work plan of the climate planner, but I would suspect, or I would understand this to be a project that could potentially fit within their work plan. So I do want to see this advanced for funding with the understanding that I think that it could not necessarily be a very time-consuming, resource-intensive standalone project of its own, but rather form part of a larger work plan. So I just want to make sure the subject is moving forward, but not necessarily incorporate a big separate standalone project.
And I think that's the understanding that I have, and maybe we go to Mr. Bull to see if he's in kind of an agreement with that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through you. This is a smallish council priority project compared to the climate action plan and the one for the corporate emissions. That said, it is a council priority project. The climate planner has kind of two components to their work scope. It's the council priority projects, and so far we've been anticipating we would work on the climate action planning, the two projects, the community one and the corporate one first, as kind of major policy pieces that are missing and need to be updated and put in place. And then the other second part of the work plan, so to say, is more operational. It supports existing climate initiatives throughout the organization, tracking of GHG emissions, but also supporting perhaps upgrades to buildings, supporting the Cool Kit program, and there's probably a number of other things that I don't pop to mind. So where this one sits, if council would ask to make sure this starts next year as well, it probably needs to affect the timing of the other two climate projects, because I as a council priority project, probably fits in that part of the work plan. We could look at that, of course, if you wish so. And because the other two projects are bigger and longer, and and we still are coming back to you with timelines and scope. So maybe the three of them could be coordinated at some point with council, and then you could get some information on how that could be timed. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this one? Yes, Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smart, for drawing our attention to this one. I'm a little conflicted. I do know that when we did our initial sort of development of this was ranked with a medium priority, and we still have some high-level priorities on this list that well, I mean, maybe some other councillors are waiting to advance them, but I just a comment about the encouraging the car share programs. Part of me, which is more sort of focused on how the market responds, is that I feel like the car share nonprofits or companies themselves should be doing this work, because they're trying to develop their own market. And I'm not really sure it is necessarily the municipality's responsibility to try and advance this work. If there are advocates and potential user groups, then the companies who offer these services already are trying to connect with them anyway. So yeah, I'm a little unsure about whether to support this.
Thank you. I am going to ask for just a motion to extend the meeting. I think we'll extend it to 9:30 if that's okay with everybody. So a motion, it's moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Smart. I wouldn't have thought of that, so it's interesting to get that perspective. And anybody else for first-time speakers? Councillor Patterson and Councillor Smart.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I too, I'm conflicted with this, because I do really look at this as a somewhat of a private business enterprise, and if there is enough demand in the community, the businesses will be approaching us and will, be putting forward a proposal to have it in the district. So I'm not totally clear on what the goal would be for the new staff that we have that is working on climate change to advance this on their own initiative. I really view it as keeping the communications lines open with those businesses and working with them if the interest is there within the community that they would want to expand their business.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to some of the comments. The reason I'm bringing this forward is because I have heard from residents, particularly over the last year, since we actually made some great improvements to our bylaws to allow for car share, that they have called various car share companies who seem to be saying that it's the municipality that is the issue for advancing car share. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so there's a communication piece that I think that these car share companies potentially might not be aware of, both the bylaw changes and the interest around the council table to provide these kind of services for our community. And so there's a simple communication piece there that might need a little bit of proactive outreach. The other thing is, as we see potential multifamily building developments come forward, now is the time in which to establish if we are going to consider policies for instance, requiring moto car share for multifamily residential projects, and if so, at what size. And those are really important conversations to have, especially if we're going to be looking at pre-zoning our buildings and losing some of that negotiation that's going to happen. So I think we need to have the opportunity to have a conversation around the table of do we want to have the style of car share where you have a car located at a particular spot related to development projects. Since I hear that there are some development projects in the pipeline of a significant enough size to have that kind of conversation. Thank you.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair. Very much concur with that. This is setting the table in advance to facilitate additional car sharing options. And, we've heard very clearly from the community that, as we implement the SSMUH, infill housing strategy, as we contemplate different housing forms, people are concerned about how people are going to get around. People are concerned about parking, provision of parking in buildings, but parking on the street. You have to provide the tools to facilitate people to select another option. And if that option is already ready-made and there available for people to take advantage of, then it increases the likelihood that they're going to take advantage of it. And so I would really, to my mind, I would take that even one more step further and to say that providing the framework and the possibility for car share is a critical piece, an underlying piece for densification. You need to provide people additional options. Excuse me, options in that regard. So, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, and I appreciate both the idea of moving this forward and also the comments that everyone has made. But I too am conflicted about this piece of the climate action plan and this piece of the climate action work. I think really it is a business initiative. It's up to the individual car share businesses to promote their services and to advertise them. It is also up to them to reach out to the municipality. I'm just not sure it's a priority for a work plan at this point in time on climate action. So I am conflicted about it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree, I think, with that. I'm not sure if it's our priority right now, so I'm going to be voting against the motion. So on that, I'll call a question. All in favor? Councillor Smart and Appleton, and those opposed? Councillor Patterson, Green, Watson, and Braithwaite. Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any other ones that they would like to put forward? Councillor Smart again.
Thank you. I just have a question regarding the project on infill housing zoning bylaw. We recently had a consultant recommend 51 recommendations, and we made a resolution at the table with regards to the remaining items being put forward to a backgrounder, I believe for a year from now. And I just don't see that in any of the paperwork, and apologies if I missed it, but I just wanted clarification that hasn't been lost, and that is part of the process. And if I could ask staff if they need a motion to sort of reconfirm that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll go to Ms. Williams for this.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Council. Council did pass a resolution seeking a project backgrounder on the remaining pieces of the infill housing refinements, and that was made a committee of the whole. It has not yet come forward to Council for adoption, so it won't make its way through these processes until once it's adopted, but it certainly will be in there after the December 9th meeting.
Thank you. Does that clarify, Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, if we could just clarify then how that timeline process will play out and when we will have that back to the table, I'd really appreciate it.
I think I heard December 9th that we'll have it back to the table. And so then the process would be that we would then speak to it at council, and then we could then have it added on to this priority list if we chose to. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you, Your Worship. The next step then, if Council so directed, would be the preparation of the actual backgrounder, and that backgrounder would be caught along with the other project backgrounders that Council asked for, and we'd bring that back mid-year for Council's consideration.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm not seeing any other recommendations coming from this table. So I'm going to then say thank you very much to staff for all of your work on this, and thank you, Council. I think we've got some great things on the list here, and we're putting some great things forward as well. So thank you. Oh, Councillor Smart.
I just wanted to clarify that items 6 and 7, will we be dealing with those next?
Items 6 and 7. Just one moment while I get to my agenda. To get to that part in my okay, so 6 I think has been dealt with, yeah, and 7 is potential new projects. I think we kind of dealt with that. Oh no, that was off the long list. Okay, so I guess we're on to number 7, potential new projects. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate staff's opportunity to provide some new projects, understanding that they will simply be project backgrounders, not for this year, but for the following year. And so I have prepared some motions, which I have given to staff in advance to help with wording and typing. And if now's the time, I will proceed with those.
Certainly, I don't know if, are they coming up on the screen or no? Okay, so maybe perhaps you can read them off, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. The first one is to direct staff to prepare a project backgrounder on providing equitable supports to the next elected council in 2026, including but not limited to guaranteed access to a healthcare plan with notable counseling support, access to a laptop computer, a review of the professional development budget, and a review of the financial supports for access to legal counsel.
You can say that one more time.
No problem. To direct staff to prepare a project backgrounder on providing equitable supports to the next elected council in 2026, including but not limited to guaranteed access to a health care plan with notable counseling support, access to a laptop computer, a review of the professional development budget, and a review of the financial supports for access to legal counsel.
Okay, does anybody want to second that? Councillor Appleton has seconded, and perhaps you can motivate Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. I feel that it's our responsibility as this council to think ahead to the next council and to not put the pressure on the next council to have to make funding decisions about themselves. That's always an awkward position to be in. And this motion is around some of the challenges that I feel that if we're to expect more equity and diversity on our council, we need to have things in place that would make running for council inclusive. And these are the things that I have come across in my term on council that while they were not an issue, particularly to me, I could see that somebody with different circumstances would not be able to overcome some of these elements. And so this is a way of us having a discussion around the financial implications of these various things and whether or not we feel these are things that should be provided to make council a safer and less risk-free and more enjoyable work experience.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Miss Bay, I believe, who has a comment. Yes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanting to clarify the intent of it, whether the intent there is to have it as a council priority project, because staff certainly can take council's direction with a council resolution with respect to the project backgrounders. Those are typically done for a service level adjustment or a council priority project. I'm just looking here at the definition of what constitutes a council priority project, and typically what we say is that it meets at least 3 of the 4 criteria, and I'll just quickly list those off. Lasts more than a month with more than 2 to 3 staff or consultants involved, requires council project budget approval, which this one might, requires significant community-wide consultation, which this one probably wouldn't, and requires council authorization to implement, which this presumably would. So it only meets 2 out of the 4. So I just wanted to not to say that it can't be it can't move forward, but it would be of a nature of a council resolution as opposed to necessarily a project backgrounder and then inclusion as a council priority project.
Right, a council resolution. And then if I can just ask Ms. Williams, would this be the right time then to be putting forward a resolution like that, or would it be better at a different time rather than around the priorities?
Thank you, through your acting mayor. Yeah, I don't think this is the appropriate meeting for it. It could certainly come forward at any council meeting or as a notice of motion. I would recommend that perhaps council may want to ask that staff come back with options to provide to the new council during council orientation next week, in addition to what was provided this year, and perhaps provide a broad view of that, but not so specific, because there may be some things missing, and there may be things in here that we are absolutely unable to provide.
So Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, I guess I have a few comments with that. I guess I did deem it to meet 3 of those criteria. Maybe the time in which you felt it would take is different than mine. Obviously, I couldn't know that. I guess my question would be, and I did conclude in the motion, including but not limited to just, and I would see that as part of the project, evaluating whether or not they were worth doing. My question, I guess, is, am I understanding that this could be handled on an operational level in a rather timely manner, because I wouldn't want this to become an election issue next year. So am I hearing that staff feels they have the operational capacity, if I brought this forward as a motion of notice, to deal with this in the coming months?
Yeah, I think that's what we're hearing from staff, I think, but we'll check with them. For clarification, Ms. Williams or Ms. Bay?
Sorry, Your Worship, and thank you. I was just rereading the motion. I wouldn't want to commit to in the next couple of months, given that Christmas is on the horizon, but certainly staff would be able to bring it back for you in 2025, long in advance of the 2026 election.
Does that suffice for you, Councillor Smart?
Certainly, if staff would prefer this as a notice of motion, could I just ask a clarification of, since I've submitted it already, would they require a follow-up email, or can it be considered sent in as a notice of motion?
I think, and perhaps, and staff may want to help you reword that, perhaps, to make it a little bit more understandable or more agreeable for people, if it's maybe reworded in such a way that staff captures kind of what they talked about as well.
Through you, Acting Mayor, sorry, I didn't understand that there were maybe additional things that staff.
I think that staff said that there may be some things that are not included in your motion that perhaps they could look at and include in that motion as well. So that's all I'm saying.
Certainly, I can follow up with this in a timely manner by email. That's fantastic news.
I think that's perfect, and as long as the seconder is agreeable to that.
Thank you, Chair. Procedurally, the motion's made and seconded. Should it not be officially withdrawn?
I think it has to be. Yeah, sorry, it should be officially withdrawn. Yes.
I will officially withdraw the motion.
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you, staff, for help on that. You had something else, Councillor Smart.
Yes, thank you. My next motion is to direct staff to prepare a project backgrounder for diversity, equity, and inclusion scan of municipal operation and facilities.
I have a seconder on that. Seconded by Councillor Appleton. I'm going to let you motivate, but then I'm going to go to staff because I know we kind of already had a discussion around that a little bit. So I'll let you motivate first. Councillor Smart.
Chair, if I could just have that read again, please.
Oh,
I do.
sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
To direct staff to prepare a project backgrounder for a diversity, equity, and inclusion scan of municipal operations and facilities.
Go ahead and motivate, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Looking at our council priority of diversity and inclusion, we haven't had a chance to really dive into this priority. And while there are a number of small projects that have come to mind, I think in that always showing first that we are doing the best we can as a municipality is a great place to start. And so I think looking at municipal operations and facilities would be great. It's become apparent to me that an overall lens and looking at where we are at now may be the most impactful first step forward. And I want to make sure that we earnestly touch on the piece of particularly diversity within this council term. Thank you.
Thank you. And perhaps before I go to you, Councillor Appleton, staff, can I just ask a question? Do we have what are we doing so far within our staff as far as operations goes around DEI?
Thank you, and my apologies. I was just checking in with Ms. Plouffe, who was our staff liaison on the Accessibility Committee, to see if there was anything that came up as during that gap analysis. I can say that, and Director Meikle is on the line. I do believe we have an inclusion officer with Parks, Rec, and Culture. Beyond that, we do have a project on our human resources work plan to develop a DEI policy for an internal use, so something that would determine how we recruit. It would apply to council's appointments to advisory bodies that, and the recruitment around that. Beyond that, what I can tell you is that we lean on our peers to find out what's best practices, acceptable methods of doing certain things, and we rely on them and the research that they've done, and duplicate that.
Thank you. And Councillor Appleton, thank you for your patience.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the clarification from staff. Because I think that those points are useful, because I would see this as being something not necessarily inward focused. I think that there's probably plenty of good work happening on the HR side with the internal staff team and internal to the organization to help look at those types of things, and that's key to workplace standards and inclusiveness in the workplace. I would see this as not well, it would include that, but I see it more as outward facing and facing out towards the public, and how we present municipal operations, and how we are mindful of DEI in the operation of things that maybe we hadn't considered, components of municipal operations and the work of the district that may not have considered those things previously. So I don't want to put the emphasis too much on, I think probably staff are being very proactive internally to the internal staff group. I'm seeing this more as externally focused to evaluate ways that we could advance DEI in the community in ways that we haven't thought of.
Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Councillor Green.
Thank you. I just want to say this certainly has merit, and I trust that staff and the organization will take this forward. And I agree with Councillor Appleton. This is also about a public-facing reflection and reflecting our community. But I appreciate Councillor Smart bringing these to our attention. Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you. I am mindful of something, and I do have a question for Ms. Plouffe, actually, in terms of workload that would, like timing and volume of work, and it relates to the accessibility plan that is going to be coming forward to council. And I know that that plan it has a number of recommendations which will require implementation. So I just, in relation to that project, there is a note on page, have I lost it? Page one. Was it page 1 or page 2? Where is it? I was looking right at it. What was that project number? Oh, sorry, got it. Yes, I found it as project number 45. And there's a note that says any further work would need to be completed separately from this project. So if you could comment on what that work would look like, and how and the amount of staff time, will it need further project backgrounds for the implementation of that plan? If you could just talk a little bit about that.
Ms. Plouffe.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So there are 16 recommendations coming out of the accessibility plan, and some are considered more easily implementable than others. When they come to council, there will be an accompanying staff report with a recommendation on kind of what the next steps are with those 16 recommendations, and whether council wants to move forward with them, or whether we need to do project backgrounders on some of those. Some of them will certainly require project backgrounders. Some of them probably can be taken care of operationally, but that assessment will have to be completed. So it is likely that's what council will direct staff to do once they see the plan. It's hard to say at this point exactly how much time or financial resources will take for those priorities. Those recommendations at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, anything else?
No, thank you. I guess just to make the comment that it's not like they're competing priorities, but accessibility and inclusion and diversity is a range of things, and we're going to have a work stream likely coming out of a project that hasn't been that once the report's presented to council is not really complete, because it's just asking us, suggesting what we should be doing as a corporation to make our community more accessible. So I'm just asking council to be cognizant of that.
Thank you. Anybody others for first-time speakers? Then I'll go to Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all the comments around the table. I do still feel strongly that this would be a great council priority project because I do feel like it is about the interaction of the community with the way that we run our municipal operations and facilities. And I do feel like we need that outside look and the council direction. And I do feel like having this, and this is not a motion to fund it, it's a motion to have a project backgrounder, which I think would pair really well with the potential project backgrounders that come out of the accessibility piece. And some of the recommendations in that backgrounder may be to include them with some of the projects that are coming out of the accessibility piece. I feel like this is something I heard so much when I went door to door in our community about not feeling welcome in some of our buildings. And I think it's something we really need to take a serious look at. So thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Okay, then I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And any opposed? None opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And do you have anything else, Councillor Smart?
Thank you. I do have one more motion, but I sense that based on the comment from the first motion that it's probably operational and that I should put a notice of motion forward, and I'm seeing a nod from Ms. Williams, so I can just bring that forward as a notice of motion, which is great news.
Good, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to thank you very much, staff, for all of your work on the priorities, as I mentioned. We really appreciate it, and again, we should be very proud of what we've accomplished so far. So now we go on to actually a notice of motion, and Councillor Smart, I will pass it over to you. Sorry, yes.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. In the staff report, if council could move the motion to reaffirm the council priority themes.
Thank you. If I could have someone move that. Councillor Appleton, did you have a question? Moved by Councillor Appleton, seconded by Councillor Green. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, though, because we're reaffirming those priorities, but we're reaffirming them as essentially as amended or as per the direction that these motions that we've just passed. So there are components in attachment 1 in terms of green language, as it were, that were passed, but some are not passed. So I wouldn't want this to inadvertently capture anything in green here that wasn't specifically endorsed by council.
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the resolution that's being referenced is, and that the 2026 to 2026 council priority themes, so those high-level diversity, the reconciliation, the housing, and so forth, that's what's referenced with respect to the themes.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. And Ms. Bay, you have one other thing.
And thank you. There's also the resolution and further that proposed adjustments to the council priorities plan as directed by council with all those adjustments be provided for in the draft 5-year financial plan and once funded be reflected in the next update of the council priorities plan.
Sorry, moved and seconded, and Councillor Appleton.
Same question, Chair.
Question and same answer. I'm seeing nods of affirmative. Yes.
Essentially, that anything that was included
Yes.
in attachment 1 that wasn't specifically endorsed is not included in this motion.
That's correct. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. We only have 5 minutes left. Councillor Smart, are you going to need more than that, do you think? Or
No, I don't think so.
okay, thank you. Go ahead for your next motion, and thank you, staff, again.
Thank you. The notice of motion, I'll read it out loud because it's short. The staff be directed to distribute the annual survey regarding council priorities that is advertised with the property tax notices to all residents in Oak Bay in a mail out separate from the property tax bill to encourage more feedback from our residents that rent their homes. I brought forward this motion and provided it in advance so that it wasn't a surprise to everybody. mainly because in our recent survey, which I love receiving and I love reading, and I really appreciate how much time staff puts into it. But there are two significant gaps in that survey, and one of them are that 25% of our, sorry, I'm rolling into the, and sorry,
I
it's just
actually need a
often-
seconder
yep.
first, so seconded by Councillor Appleton, sorry. And I am going to ask for a motion, oh no, I guess I can't because we have a motion on the floor now. Can I ask for an extension? I'm going to ask for an extension for till 9:40, please. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much.
Apologies, in the trying to be quick, I rolled into the motivation. Because we have 25% of our residents that rent, but only 3% filled out the survey, I was proactively trying to bring the discussion to the table of how could we send this out in such a way that we could make our survey more useful. There's also a disparity, a related disparity to having a very small percentage of youth filling out our survey. So this motion is just with regards to understanding that some of the greatest impact that we seem to have acquired from a community feedback point of view was little postcard mail-outs like we did for info housing got some of the best responses from our residents as far as feedback. And I thought that something like that similarly might start us off at not skewing the percentage of responses that we receive from property tax notices. So I just wanted to get out of any potential relationship we had with receiving the majority of responses from property owners. And this is with great understanding that I know that our staff has reached out by other methods as well to capture renters, but obviously there's still a skewing that is happening. So I just wanted to put this forward as the potential to not create a problem for ourselves by associating the two things together.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, Appleton, you don't know, Watson?
And just a question of clarification. The motion actually says to distribute the survey, but I think you're suggesting that it's to distribute information about the survey. So could we amend the motion to do that, please?
So amended, thank you.
And the seconder, okay. And I actually wonder if there's maybe multiple ways that we can ensure that we can get responses. So I wonder if a motion to refer to staff to come back with options on how to increase the diversity of respondents for our annual survey might be in order for that. I mean, that might work better, I think. Yeah? Okay.
Be amenable to that.
Okay, so the motion would be to refer to staff to come back with options on how to increase the diversity of respondents to our annual survey. So that's a motion. Any seconder? Seconded by Councillor Watson. Discussion on that amendment. I guess it's an amendment, is it? Yes? I'm getting confused now. On the amendment, all in favor? And any opposed? No. So I think then that takes care of the main motion as well. So I think that's good. Okay, perfect. Thanks for bringing that forward. And I think we just need a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Thank you very much. And thank you, staff, for everything tonight. I think we did that